Committee. Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First of all, I'd like to apologize for delaying the start of the meeting, but obviously our executive session ran a little bit longer. Good evening and welcome. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. If there's anyone else present who is recording or planning to record at this meeting, would you please indicate at this time? Hi, Alana. Anyone else? All right, very good. Okay. First item on our agenda are approval of consent agendas, starting with regular meeting of November 17th. Any corrections in or additions for that meeting?
Motion to accept the meeting of December 17th.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any dissension? No. Good. Okay, regular meeting, December 1st. I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion?
Second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any corrections? No. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, policy subcommittee meeting of October 22nd. Accept the motion.
Motion to approve the policy subcommittee meetings of something to
22nd of October. Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Policy subcommittee meeting, November 12th, 2015. I'll accept the motion.
Make a motion to accept the minutes as presented from November 12th, 2015 for the policy subcommittee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Made and seconded. Any corrections? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Policy Subcommittee, December 3rd, 2015. I'll accept the motion.
Motion to approve policy subcommittee meeting minutes for December 3rd, 2015.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor? Aye.
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 All right. So this is the time for the school committee to hear public input. The school committee welcomes public comments. We'll leave it at that. Is there anyone who'd like to address the committee at this time? Okay. That was quick. All right, student reps. Should have a lot.
Yeah, there's been a lot that's been going on at this time of year. Tomorrow at the Carl Brontina Performing Arts Center is the winter concert for the music students. There'll be different choirs, bands, and orchestras performing there. And what's really great about this concert is that alumni or parents, they can come up at the end and we all sing Hallelujah, the Hallelujah chorus. So that's really exciting, and it's really exciting to see people come back and sing with us. So I encourage all of you to come too. You guys will have a great time. Speaking of music, Thursdays, which is the a cappella group that we have at the school, they made it into the quarterfinals for ICSA, which is like a Pitch Perfect kind of competition. I don't know if any of you have seen that movie, but it's where groups compete at a cappella competitions, so it's very much like that. And Pitch Perfect was probably based off of that. The Sound of Music, the musical, it happened, and it was amazing. We're so lucky to have so many talented students at our school. The Chelmsford In Tune is another event that's happening, and it's like a talent show for people with musical abilities, and that is also a fundraiser to raise money for an organization. And there's a lot of other things that are happening that are really exciting, such as a chopsticks competition on December 22nd at our school. And I was talking to the people that are running this competition, and they said that we would have to use chopsticks to move large objects or small objects, such as a marble. I can't use chopsticks, but I'll try to do my best. around this time of year, a lot of people are donating to other charities, and it's really nice to have different clubs such as the Interact Club and the World Language Honor Society holding fundraisers to give back to the community, and that's a really nice thing. So the Interact Club is looking for toys that you all can donate, and they have to be new. And they will be donated to the pediatric department at Lowell General Hospital. And also, this is also really important, 2 weeks ago I attended the Northeast Regional Student Advisory Council, NERSAC, and I am the delegate for the town. And what we do there is we try to discuss what goes on in our school, and we try to improve other schools by doing that. And we also receive feedback, and we try to implement any changes we can to make our school a better place. So that went really well, and I'm looking forward to some great changes at our high school.
Was there any particular topic that you spent a lot of time on?
Yes, we spent a lot of time on discussing the importance of civics, and a lot of students say that history isn't their favorite subject. And the thing is, it's such a great subject, and people shouldn't be thinking like that. So we're thinking of having an event where we can raise awareness for the importance of civics, and especially with this election coming up, it's so important that kids my age who can actually vote, like who can vote in the election, know that they have a voice, and that that they should use their voice, because it's so important, because all this determines our future. And I think we spent a lot of time on that, so we'll try to do something in the school at CHS and other schools around Massachusetts, and so we'll try to get people involved and really know that that's important.
Very good.
And along with the theme of giving, there's a new group started with Dean Galante called the Gifting Girls, who are collecting money from Plus Blocks all this week to buy supplies to donate to needy families. So they came around this week, and they came around today, and it seemed to go very well. A lot of kids were very interested in donating. So it seems like it'll be a great thing this year. The basketball kicks off the sports seasons tonight. The Tundra is supporting them with whiteout, and any student from CHS that comes wearing white to support the team gets in for only $1. Also, the children's play auditions are today, tomorrow, and Thursday, and the play is being written by 3 seniors, so we're all really excited to see that go up. There's a holiday lyrical lunch in the Learning Commons on Friday the 18th, so that'll be really fun, where students can perform at the lunches holiday songs. And it's really just a cool way to see all your friends sing, and sometimes the students sing along with them. There's going to be a criminal justice career panel on the 21st, so representatives from all different branches of criminal justice will be there for students to ask them questions about, their education and through college, and how they can get involved if they're interested. And the class of 2017 is having a fundraiser this Thursday at Applebee's. So if you present a flyer to your server, 15% of your bill goes to the class of 2017.
Okay, very good. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? All right, thank you very much. Do we have good news?
Yep, we have a few things for good news and an announcement. So first of all, at McCarthy Middle School, the Chelmsford First LEGO League robotic teams have advanced to the Robonautics State Finals. Don't know what the Robonautics State Finals are, but sounds good. They'll be at at WPI Worcester Polytech on September 19th. And, I'm sorry, they went there on, December 19th. Apparently I missed a few months. December 19th, and these are made up of students 9 through 14. They're judged on their robot's performance, their project, and their adherence to the FIRST, which is another acronym, core values for robotics, which is great. For an announcement, we do have kindergarten registration coming up, and for students that have not attended Chelmsford Public Schools yet as a first grader, please keep those dates, check the website. They start on January 19th, 20th, and 21st, variety of different times, so please make sure you're registering your children. And last but not least, we always talk about our universal design for learning, using our interactive whiteboards. We have a great little clip. I'm going to really be hopeful that we have some volume, because I haven't checked it before I came in, but these are our 4-year-olds, which are down at the Lions Pride, down at the Wesley, housed at the Westland School, and they're using it to do, a little bit of movement activity, so I thought it'd be nice if we could show it. It's a very short clip, so let's all cross our fingers. One way that we, work with our students. Granted, these are our 4-year-olds, but they're working on their skills.
All boys.
Yeah, all boys, which is
Love
great.
that.
And their Supermans are unbelievable. They'll be great when they get up to the elementary and middle schools. So it's nice if we have an opportunity to showcase what the students are doing in the classroom, and this is one opportunity that we captured. So thank you.
Thank you.
you.
That was excellent.
Introduce the real language. the
Yes,
language there.
heading into the new business for the evening, we have for a spotlight on one of our academic departments. I'd like to welcome Ms. Sharon Charbonnier up to have a presentation on our world language program. If you recall, at the last meeting, South Row came and talked, and we did a discussion about a school. So we're going to be alternating. So tonight is our first academic department that's up. And if you want to introduce, actually pull up more chairs, please. And then, yes, introduce who you brought with you, and we'll turn it over to you.
Excellent. So actually, I should probably begin the evening by saying bonsoir, buenas noches, salvete. So those are the 3 languages we actually offer at the high school. We have French, Spanish, and Latin. Let me introduce the people that I brought with me. I have Senora Fanny Zambrano, who is our grade 7 and 8 Spanish teacher, one of them, at the Parker Middle School. I have Senora Barbara Taha, who is one of the Spanish teachers at the high school. She teaches our freshman level 3 Spanish 2 students, and she is also our pre-AP and AP teacher. And then I have Madame Marin Chagnin, who is one of the French teachers at the high school. She is also the French Honor Society advisor. So we've kind of got the whole gamut of the program with us. So we're really excited to talk about our program. We have a program from grade 7 all the way through grade 12. We have heterogeneous grouping at the middle school level, and we have more levels at the high school. So we have honors level, we have H2, and we have level 3 in Spanish for our intermediate grouping of students. We also have AP and French and Spanish. In terms of content that's covered in these different levels, the students are actually getting the same content, whether that honors, H2, or level 3. When they get out in the world, they're all going to have to be able to buy a plane ticket or buy a train ticket or ask for directions somewhere or order food. They all have the same skills. But what they do with that and how they interact with the material and the supports that they need to be successful in these everyday real-world tasks are going to be different. And that's where the leveling at the high school comes in. We also have independent study options. We have several students that are interested in taking the initiative and learning languages on their own. And so we take those students under our wing as well. This year we have independent studies in Russian and Polish. So even though we don't have formalized instruction for several languages, we do provide the opportunities for our students to become lifelong learners and global citizens in as many ways as possible. So these are what we call the 5 C's of language learning. They're communities, cultures, comparisons, and connections, and they're all tied together by communication. These are the building blocks of all language learning, whether you are going to just dive right into the country, or you're going to learn it in the classroom, or you're going to do a combination thereof. It actually drives all curricular decisions. And what it does is it provides the structure to learn about the language, because as you're learning a new language, you need to learn the vocabulary and some of the grammar structures in order to get your point across. But you also need the opportunities to make connections to your own languages, to compare experiences that you're learning about with new cultures versus your own experiences. And what it's going to do actually encourages interdisciplinary learning. So in our classrooms, we're actually able to bring in a lot of business. We're able to bring in a lot of history. We're able to bring in science. We're actually do a little bit of math. We do a lot with the arts. So the students are getting a full complement of learning through the language. And so we're opening their eyes, and again, we're kind of reinforcing the concept of learning goes beyond a classroom. We're all interconnected, and we're going to learn about the world beyond. It's also compatible, and what's great about these 5 C's, it's very compatible with state standards. So the students are learning how to interpret a variety of materials. They're learning how to assimilate information and then present information. They're learning how to discuss, and they're learning how to, just kind of deal with everything at once. So it's an excellent way to reinforce content, in other academic areas. This is learning in the classroom. We have multiple ways to learn foreign language. When you talk about the stages of language development, you actually have multiple ways to look at it. You have the natural learning styles of every student. When you're first learning a language, you always kind of grow really fast. You get the words, you get the expressions, you're confident, and then all of a sudden you hit a plateau. And then you almost fall back a little bit, and then all of a sudden everything clicks in at once, and then you're just good to go, and you're just going to be a sponge absorbing. Where people fall in that natural ebb and flow of language learning can happen anywhere from a month to 4 years. And so we have to take account all these natural stages of learning. All of them are in our classroom simultaneously. And so we use a variety of strategies to support our students so they can access the material that also kind of correspond and correlate to their natural learning styles. Then we also get the initial stages, our middle school program and our 1H2s at the high school. You're learning vocabulary, you're learning the basic grammar structures, you're learning the building blocks in order to start communicating your ideas. It's a lot of imitation at first. Then we move into our year 2 and our year 3 at the high school, which is typically freshmen and sophomores. They're still learning about the language, they're still getting vocabulary, they're still learning grammar, but they're also starting to explore and interpret music, art, all kinds of documents. I know my students in my freshman class are currently analyzing marketing campaigns that are occurring in France and other Francophone countries, and they're freshmen. But they're able to do that because they're now starting to learn through the language. They're taking those building blocks and the vocabulary that they've been learning as initial language learners, and they're starting to translate that into expressing their own opinions. And then they transition to our upper level students, our juniors and our seniors, whether it's H2 level or if it's AP. These students, minimal grammar instruction, they get the vocabulary that they need in context. They're learning almost exclusively through the language. So we're talking about current events. We're talking about politics. We're talking about social things that are happening. We're talking about the environment. We're talking about art. A variety of subjects they're now learning through the language, both about their own culture and about the cultures that are in their respective target languages, whether it's Spanish, French, and even with Latin, we make connections to the origins of the Western world. And they're working on language development and how we have certain words that we have. So we kind of tailor everything as we go through. And so we're kind of working all of this in our classrooms. Now to do that, we have a very clear outline from grade 7 all the way through grade 12, which we call vertical articulation. That means they will get the same set of themes. They'll look at family, they'll look at the environment, they'll look at politics, they'll look at art, but they'll do it at moments that are appropriate to their stages. So if you look, for example, for the family, as middle school students or level 1 students, they're going to learn family members. They're going to learn how to say my, his, her. They'll describe their family members. Then we get to our intermediate students. They can start talking about more of the sociological concepts of what is family, blended family structures. Then we look at our students that are our juniors or our seniors, and they'll start looking at government studies and statistics relating to a variety of family structures. What is family in other culture? They'll start making those comparisons. So we'll take the same themes, we will just adapt it to the level, and we'll expand as we move through. And that's consistent with everything that we're looking at. Then we have contextualized instruction. Again, all that means it's theme-based. Whenever we learn something new, it's not just, okay, conjugate a verb, memorize some vocabulary. There is some of that. There has to be. They're learning a language. But we're going to give them context. You are living with a host family. This is what you're doing this weekend. Your host family is curious about what you do at home, and they explain to you what they do, and then the students have a conversation about it. We'll give them something that they could actually encounter beyond the classroom if they were to travel to that country, either as part of a year abroad program or even as just a tourist. So we try to set up context to give them situations to kind of practice. So they're creating meaning themselves, but they're also functioning with the situation that they could encounter. So again, we're preparing them for life beyond the classroom. With that in mind, we do a lot of performance-based learning, so that's going to be project-based. So we give the students the tools that they need, but we're going to make sure that we assess them with projects of things that they're going to do. We've had them create marketing campaigns. They're presented cooking shows. They have written children's books. They have participated in political debates or education debates, or they've talked about the benefits or the disadvantages of social media. So we will take topics that are relevant to them, and then we'll give them tasks, again, that they could encounter beyond the classroom. And then finally, we align that as well with our assessments. So we have several common assessments, and the formats that we choose, again, are going to be tasks that they're going to use beyond Chelmsford. So our freshmen at the high school are focusing on leaving voicemails. That's something that in today's society, with the globalized economy, they could have to leave a voicemail for somebody in another language. So we're giving them the skills, how to do that, not just the vocabulary, but the format, the behaviors, the expressions that are all appropriate to it. For our grade 8 students, we're focusing on informal email writing, because that's something they will do, whether it's informal email writing or it's posts on Facebook or it's short tweets to somebody. That's things that legitimately they might have to do in the language. So we're getting them to practice those skills as 8th graders. Our juniors and our seniors, we actually rotate the type of common assessments that we're doing. This year we're focusing on email writing, but in a more formalized context, in the context of the working world, or in the context of education. So they already know how to do an email, that's something they do every day, but in the working world, they'll be communicating with people that they may not have met in another culture, so we're giving them the language, the tools, the structures, so they can practice these skills now and apply them beyond the classroom. We also, on an alternate year, we're also giving them practice with cultural comparisons. We all listen to radio broadcasts or we see news clips and we talk about, well, this is what I heard, this is what I saw, this is what I think, and we back it up with evidence. Well, we give them those tools in the target language. We'll have them read something, in French, in Spanish. We'll have them compare it with what they know about what's going on here in the United States. And they'll have those authentic conversations about topics that we all have either in the office or with friends or, in a variety of situations. Again, we're giving them the tools for things of how to use language beyond the classroom. So to support all this learning and to support our students that have such a variety of learning styles, we have lots of tools and technologies that we use. We have the CHS Language Lab, which was installed about 6 years ago. It's fully digitized. It's a phenomenal space. Students can go in and they can participate in simulations of authentic experiences. Here you've got a pair of students that are actually recording advertisements for radio. They have left voicemails. They have had just conversations randomly. We just throw out a topic, we compare them up with anybody in the space, and they can just have a conversation about whatever topic we've just happened to splash across one of the boards with the projectors in the space. They do some of their cultural comparisons. They also have access, clearly to the computer so they can listen to videos. They can try to simulate some of the pronunciation that they get. There are just a variety of tools, and there isn't an activity that we have wanted to do that we have been unable to do in the lab. It truly has allowed us to just expand our curriculum immensely. So it's a phenomenal space. The students enjoy it. They're so excited when they go upstairs. In addition to the language lab, we also have a lot of web-based supports and mobile applications, which I know the middle school has taken advantage of because they don't have the opportunity for a language lab, so they've actually been using iPads and computer labs. But there are sites such as VoiceThread, which is being used, Audacity, tools that allow the students to participate in these simulations of authentic experiences and still give them the advantages of the technology. We also use a lot of technology tools such as Kia and Quizlet and Conjugamos, which allows students to practice just some of the vocabulary acquisition, practice some of the verb conjugation, some of the nuts and bolts that they get in the classroom, but students sometimes need additional supports or they need to see it in different contexts. So we ensure that we have tools available to them both in the classroom and beyond the classroom, directed by the teacher, available to parents, so they know what sites to go to for additional supports for their students. Then we start moving into how do the students use it beyond the classroom. At the high school, we have 3 World Language Honor Societies. We have the Société Honoraire de Français, the National Junior Classical League, which is Latin, and we have the Sociedad Honoraria Hispánica, which is going to be the Spanish Honor Society. So these honor societies are for our juniors and seniors. They must have had 3 years of language, 90 plus average in each of those consecutive language classes, and they have to have a positive attitude towards learning. And with these students, we recognize them in an Honor Society induction ceremony in the spring. The ceremony is, though it's dictated by the national associations, it's entirely student-directed. The students organize it. They organize the new inductees. And as seen in one of the photos, the guest speaker is actually one of our students who talks about their language experiences inside the classroom and beyond the classroom. So in addition to building leadership capacity among our students, it's also a service-oriented group. The students actually have raised money in the past for the Chelmsford Santa Fund and the Chelmsford Food Pantry, and last year they actually raised money for school supplies to send to schools in Sierra Leone. So those are honor societies. Then to support and to complement learning in the classroom, we also take learning out into the community. In the past, we've had our Latin classes take students to see the exhibit on Pompeii with Mount Vesuvius at the Museum of Science. And so for our upper level students and our 3s and 4s who have studied the history of Mount Vesuvius, they were able to actually see some of the artifacts. And even for some students in our level 1s and 2s who were just learning about some of the Latin history, they actually got to see some of the structures of some of the frescoes, the wall frescoes, and some of the structures of the rooms. So they were actually able to take what they saw in the classroom and see it in real life without traveling to Italy. We have also had students go to the Museum of Fine Arts and participate in a painting workshop that reinforces some of the techniques of some of the Spanish painters that they studied in class. Students have also participated in a Latin rhythms exposition in which they learned the history of music in different genres, and they were actually able to participate in it. Again, they're taking their language that they've done in the classroom and they're using it beyond the classroom. In terms of French, there is every year a competition sponsored by the Club Richelieu in Lowell, and that's a group, it's a national group that promotes the use of the French language. We've participated for the past 2 years, and our Chelmsford students have actually won the local competition and have been runners-up in the regional competition. And the students actually use their language to talk about a topic. The first year, we had a student talk about the value of learning multiple languages. Last year, we had a student talk about Steve Jobs and his rise to Apple. And I actually just got the topic for today. They need to talk about a French-speaking inventor who has contributed to something internationally. So that's going to be the topic that the students will be preparing this year. So they're able to, again, take their learning that they've done in class and apply it outside in the community. And then finally, we have our learning abroad options. These are students that have taken language for multiple years and have actually been able to go abroad and use it. We've had a teacher take students to Costa Rica, and while in Costa Rica, though they didn't stay with host families, they did explore extensively the biodiversity of the country, and they actually visited schools and took school supplies with them and, just experience culture that way. They did some high adventure work because Costa Rica is so diverse. You've got, it can be freezing cold up in the mountains, yet they can go down to the beaches and it's really warm. So they just get to just experience a whole different type of climate and environment that's entirely different. We also have had host exchange programs with schools in Burgos, Spain, and Zaragoza. And while in Spain, they were able to, do a lot with art and architecture, again, building upon what they learned in the classroom. They visited the Gaudi houses in Barcelona, as well as La Sagrada Familia, which is one of Gaudi's famous cathedrals. They were able to participate in a pottery workshop in Goya's birthplace. And they were just able to visit Spanish ruins with the Spanish Wars, Civil War. So they were able to just learn a whole lot about Spain, and they also spent time in host families. So they were able to use their Spanish day in, day out, and really start making those connections about what life is like in Spain for a teenager. We've also had a similar exchange program with France, which we just started last year. CHS traveled to Normandy last February, and we actually reciprocated this year. In the past October, we had a group of 20 students from Normandy visit us here. So the students really got to build connections over the past year with families, and I know students have gone back on their own to actually visit the families that they stayed with. And I know the connections are going to continue. And while in Normandy, clearly we visited the D-Day beaches, so we built upon that history. We got to build, upon what they'd studied about gastronomy, so all the cheeses and all the different pastries. And clearly we went to Paris, so they were able to experience that for a day. So again, we have provided multiple opportunities for learning in the classroom, in the community, and then beyond. And that's what we strive to do in our world language program. Thank you.
I'm very glad that I took 4 years of Spanish when I was in high school because there was no math and science. So I'm very relieved that I didn't have to go through that. And I feel really bad for our students, but tough. I can't think of anything else. Those are so French, Spanish.
For middle school, all the way through grade 12, and Latin, grade 9 through grade 12.
We used to offer German.
Long time ago.
Italian,
Prior to
too.
my arrival.
Italian.
That was all prior to my arrival.
Yeah.
Is there a reason why that's
Part of it's,
interest?
yeah, and just, practical things like numbers of sections and where the greatest demand is. Has been, obviously I should let you talk. But, the demand for Spanish instruction in recent years, I think it's safe to say, has been high because of the practical use of it.
Right.
Well, what we've tried to do is, there are so many languages out there,
Sure.
and there are so many students that have so many diverse interests, and colleges are great about letting students kind of craft their own major. So what we're trying to do is give the students the tools that they can take so they learn one language and they can transfer them to another. And so knowing that we can't offer all these because we do have the practical concerns, we're giving them the tools that they'll be able to transfer.
Any thoughts, or are there any plans to expand Chinese or Japanese? Or?
There is. I mean, that's a dream. We would love to be able to offer more languages, but again, it comes to the question of, generating the interest. You might have initial interest, but learning a language is challenging.
Oh, yeah.
It takes a lot of dedication, motivation. Sometimes the novelty wears off, and then people kind of fall away, and then it becomes a question of sustainability. So yes, those surveys, those informal conversations with students are always happening, and it becomes a question also of, is it fiscally feasible?
Right.
So again, we try to choose the languages that typically we see, but give the students the skills to transfer. And if they really are dedicated and they want to do that independent study option, a lot of us speak enough languages that we can help guide them.
How would a student go about starting a self-directed or an independent study program?
I know with the students that we've had, one of them I think approached you and another one came to me. And then we just kind of put it out there, so who's interested in working with this student? And there are a lot of great sites out there that will help the students. And, so we just kind of check in with them. We make sure that there's a reason for it. Like, for example, the student with Polish has grandparents that speak it. And so, we've ensured the student that will get, copies of conversations, recordings that he's willing to do, and they just have to think of it and then usually talk to their guidance counselor or come talk to one of us, and we'll get the ball rolling.
How does that fit into a school day? Do they have a block of time where they go and work independently? Is that something that's done entirely in their own time?
Nope. The two students that I know of this year, they actually have a block that's scheduled in for independent study time. I'm working with a French 1 student, who for a variety of reasons can't fit into their block. They just come and, they work independently part of the time. They come and spend part of the time with me, for some of the guidance. So.
Right.
Was there any interest in online learning? Anybody doing individual courses? If we don't offer it, have you expanded or done any research in those areas?
We've done some minimal research, but again, it's a question of finding a program that is appropriate for high school students, because language, there's so many different entry points and so many different paths and so many different ways to learn a language that we haven't found yet, and it's probably out there. We just haven't tapped into it yet. If somebody came with an idea, perhaps we'd look at it, but again, it would be an independent study option. And the online learning, that's something always to investigate, but we haven't found an option yet that we think is great.
One of the things I loved about your presentation tonight was the obvious emphasis on the project-based learning. I think that's really a great thing. I wanted to ask, though, how does that integrate with the DDMs that the state is requiring? Are you able to come up with kind of project-based measures of the student's progress, or are we just having to give tests to give tests?
No, with the DDMs, as I said when we were talking about the real world tasks, what we've chosen to do for the DDMs, and honestly we're calling them common assessments because they're skills that we want them to have. With our grade 7 students, they're listening to authentic interviews, and then they're answering questions. So we're kind of building their interpretive skills, because if you don't have that what we call comprehensible input, they will have difficulty giving us the output that we're expecting later on. So we kind of do something that's going to build their comprehension skills.
Okay, and so you're able to show the
So we're
growth
definitely
over the
able to
course
show
of the
growth
year.
over the course of the year with
Wonderful.
vocabulary acquisition. Instead of doing a pre-post measure, we opted to do it for each unit, because then we can see their skills and their application of skills.
Great.
Do you have any department needs that we should know about at our level? Hopefully not. Oh, it's an opportunity to tell us. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's always needs. I know the state has, there's a bill right now in front of the state called the Seal of Biliteracy, and we're kind of waiting to see exactly the progress on that. And what that recognizes is a student's ability to communicate in another language, read, write, be able to speak. The overall communication that we see in all state standards, in national standards. We're waiting to see what's going to happen with that, to see what it is, but that's also interdisciplinary learning at that point. I think we're good. We have built a really strong program. We have, definitely got the kids using the language now. We still, are overcoming that fear of, this is hard, this is new, I can't do it. But we've really tried to come up with a lot of the project-based and getting them to do tasks that are building their confidence. So, any terms of big needs right now, we're just working forward.
Sounds
so
great.
I think we're great.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming.
Thanks to the rest of you for coming in and a supportive role.
Okay, as we transition to the next item on the agenda, item number 2 is a recommendation to award contract for the comprehensive facilities assessment. As you know, I've been reporting up periodically the progress we've made on that, and I'm very excited tonight to introduce you to the firm that we internally have selected to work with us on this particular project. If you recall, this fall, the committee authorized us going out to RFP to bring a firm in to assist us in conducting this comprehensive facilities assessment. We ended up receiving 6 responses from interested firms that wanted to work with us. Of those 6 firms, 6 proposals, myself, Michelle, Linda, Gary Persichetti, and Kathleen Canavan from the town sat down, reviewed each of the proposals, and we selected 3 firms to come in and actually provide presentations to us. And then of those 3 firms here this evening is firm Dorr and Whittier. And I'd like to ask Brad Dorr, and he can introduce his colleagues when he comes up. Here this evening, they're going to make an abridged version of the presentation for you so that you can get a sense of the approach that they would recommend us taking with the comprehensive facilities assessment. Ultimately, in the end, again, the 5 of us were unanimous in our selection of this firm to work with us in the district. This firm was the firm that actually recently helped Borica complete their comprehensive assessment, which led to the successful new high school project going forward with the MSBA for Borica. So they have a lot of experience in our particular area and region. And then ultimately, at the end of the presentation, I'll have a couple of recommendations for contract. But I'd like to introduce Brad and his associates and turn it over to you for a presentation.
Bonsoir, mes amis. And I don't think we're going to go any deeper than that, because going back to my middle school, high school French, I wouldn't want to challenge myself and bore all of you. But thank you very much for allowing us to speak with you tonight. We have had an opportunity to meet with certain members, of some of your committee. And tonight, what we wanted to do, as Jay was saying, is give you a little bit of an overview of, who we are in terms of our firm, and then also give you a little bit of a sneak preview of what, we view as the process as it relates to master planning. So maybe with that, we can move right along. This is just a quick overview of, what the agenda is for tonight. We're going to, again, tell you about who we are. We'll have a little bit of what we've done, and then I'll turn it over to my team here, and we'll go through the approach that we typically see in these types of efforts. And then if people have questions, certainly we want to address all of those the best that we can. So in terms of our team, going kind of from the top left to right, my partner Don Walter and myself are both principals of the firm. In terms of responsibility for this particular project, for better or worse, I'm going to be your day-to-day guy, in terms of kind of the principal aspect of it. And then Michelle Rogers, here to my right, will be your project manager. Jason Boone is our educational planner, which is somewhat unique in terms of some of the firms that are out there that we compete with on a day-to-day basis. Not everybody has that. Emily Ray, working with Jason in terms of helping to facilitate, the educational planning aspects of this. And then Rob Fitzgerald, who's not with us today, but he's a key member in terms of organizing our SWAT team, if you will, for going out and doing the facilities assessment on all of your school buildings. To give you a sense of and hopefully instill some confidence in you that we've actually done this before. This is just a representation of some of the work that we've done more recently, both at the school level and master planning community wide. So we do a lot of work. About 80% of our our workload is tied into schools. So we have a significant amount of experience in that. The superintendent was talking about Billerica, which we have recently completed, and now they're moving forward with a high school, and then we're working in those other communities there as well. And you can see some of the images there. That's what sometimes the successful process starting today with the master planning leads to in terms of actually getting buildings developed. Okay. We would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about sustainability today, particularly coming off of a big meeting over in Paris with the climate change meeting. It's really an important thing to factor into the decision making as early on in the process as you can. So we're going to talk a little bit about planning, but it's really important for us, to understand what your sustainability objectives may or may not be. We take it as a firm very seriously. We're a top ENR 100 firm, so we have a whole bunch of projects. I don't know what exactly happened that. We have actually 11 of those gold lead projects that we've been able to successfully work with the MSBA towards doing. And if you end up going down that path at some point in time, there's additional reimbursement that's part of being able to have a sustainable project in the mix. Okay. This is really, there are a few takeaways that we want you to have tonight in terms of the master planning process and what that really means. And we're going to start to break some of those things down. But one of the things we want to understand is what are the problems that you're currently experiencing today with your buildings. And sometimes, you can have, we like to call them vintage buildings, and we've worked with buildings that go back into, the early 1800s, all the way to where you have buildings that have been relatively newly completed. And it's important to understand what that means, because not only are we talking about capital improvements or new buildings, but we're also talking about understanding what's required on an ongoing maintenance perspective, because in order for your buildings to be successful over the long haul, there's a bunch of steps that, you're going to need to look at, which may be smaller scale capital improvements or maintenance type projects. And that's something when we talk about putting a plan together, we want to understand. It's going to be things that, what are the larger scale projects that may fall out of it? We don't have any preconceived notion of what that may be. We understand that at the moment you may not have a preconceived notion, which we think is terrific, because until you get in there and really start to understand what's going on, both from a facilities perspective and what Jason's going to speak to, which is understanding how you want to deliver education in the community, opinions and perspectives really can change. But what comes out of that is really a good understanding of what the issues are, and then how do we prioritize those things over time. Because unless you're the first community that we've worked with that has unlimited funding, okay, it's going to be a case where you're going to have to look at and sometimes make hard decisions, but make decisions as to how those projects, whether they're maintenance projects, whether they're new building projects, whether they're renovation projects, or whatever they may be, how those are going to roll out over time, so that you're being able to go and use this plan and this as a living, breathing document and a tool for the next 10 to 15 years. So it's something really that if we're able to go and get this successfully completed in the next 5 or 6 months, it's a tool that you will have and be able to use far into the future. Okay. So with that, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Michelle, and then she can go through this diagram and a little bit of discussion about at least how we see trying to break down the process and put this report together that I was speaking about.
So what you see in front of you is a graphic representation of how we actually lay out the work. Jason and I get together with your facilities assessment people and with your school, your principals at every one of the schools, and we have a kickoff meetings and gather lots of information. So we spend the first couple of weeks just gathering information that we're going to get from principals, maintenance staff, janitorial staff, sometimes even the kids. And then we divide ourselves into 2 different groups. The facilities group is a SWAT team of 3 to 4 smaller groups of 3 members of our team. Jason, I'm going to let Jason talk about the educational programming piece of it, but we take our SWAT teams around to each of the facilities, and we begin to look in depth at every single facility, both inside and out. The site conditions, the building envelopes, the windows, the doors. And you can see at this point in time, the stars are actually where we are planning to meet with the community. And sometimes the community is the school community itself, the small groups of teachers. Sometimes the community is the public, and sometimes it's even larger, people that you invite to the table, so the greater public. These stars represent all levels of that community group. So we'll have several meetings, whether or not we do them together as part of our educational planning, or if we do them separate as part of our facilities assessment. Between now and the time that we actually come back and report out to you, we'll have a couple of those community meetings. And then while Jason's doing his work and the SWAT teams are doing their work, we're actually gathering information that's important to all of us. Then we come together and we begin to talk about what we found. So that's really the first report, where we come back to you and say, this is what we've learned from you. We don't have solutions at this point in time, we just have knowledge. We tell you which buildings have some problems or issues, which ones are in great condition. We talk to you about what has come out of the visioning sessions. And then we begin to develop options from that information, taking that information and weaving it together. We begin to develop options that solve any of your problems, both now and in the future. We then come back and we'll have several iterations where we develop the options and present to you, go back out and do this one more time. And then we actually begin to start talking about priorities and cost, which are both important. So we begin to look at all the issues that we've discovered and begin to prioritize what those are and group them together in ways that mean something and are most cost effective. In doing that, we develop another series of options or levels, and then we come back to you with a draft report and a final report, and all of this throughout the entire process. The community is involved on several different levels many times in us getting information, several times in us presenting, and then other times in actually having discussions and hands-on, working together to prioritize and do visioning. So with that in mind, I'm going to take you through what actually happens to the facilities and site assessment, so the top part of this key, and then I'll hand it over to Jason to talk about the lower part. I'll do this.
Sorry, I'm
That's okay.
I'm picking up the cues.
So through our discoveries of the buildings, we're going to be looking at the building envelopes, the architecture, the structural, MEP, which is mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. We're going to be looking to talk about heat. We're going to be going through the buildings in the winter time, so we don't know if you have air conditioning that works well or if you have any at all, what kind of dehumidification series you might have. So those are kinds of things that we're going to be gathering from people that we speak to who are actually very familiar with the building. We'll look at your plumbing and your fire protection. Sometimes you have sprinklers, sometimes you don't. We'll talk about some of the triggers that would require you to put in sprinklers if you're doing work within the building. Where do you hit those triggers? At what point? How much work can you do before you have to, by code, do those kinds of things? Same for the accessibility. We'll talk about your site and civil planning. Site circulation is always a big one. How many parking spaces do you have? How do the cars pick up the drop-off, buses, those kinds of things. Hazardous materials is also very important to know. And everybody, the flags go up for this one. It's important to know if you have them, but it's more important to know what condition they're in. So if they're in good condition, generally it's not a problem. Hazardous materials become an issue when they start deteriorating. So we're going to tell you through our assessments whether or not it's an immediate concern or whether or not you're okay with those materials. Technology, communication, security, big issues right now. What state are those in? Are they antiquated? Are they up to date? How are they communicating not only technology within your classrooms, but technology throughout your entire buildings? Accessibility, as I just spoke about. And FF&E, fixtures, furniture, food equipment, kitchens, all those things. It's very thorough, and I'm sure there's other little pieces within each of these groups that we'll be talking about in assessing. So we do a thorough look at each of the buildings. Go ahead. And we categorize them into these 7 categories. So we look at health, safety, and welfare. We look at code compliance, and it's based on current code. So even if your building was built 25 years ago, it may have been in compliance at that time. It is still in compliance because it met the code it was built. And then we're going to look at whether or not it meets today's code. So you'll have both of those assessments when we go through our programs. Functional use of the building, handicap accessibility, maintenance, how are you maintaining the buildings, what can be done to help assist in the maintenance piece. We're going to touch on that in a moment. Energy efficiency and sustainability, 2 very important topics as we move forward. And then, again, the hazardous materials, which comes back again. If you go to the next piece here. We take each of these items. So as we're going through the buildings, we're actually creating line items for each item that we see. And we're categorizing into what you can't see is across the top is those 7 categories that I just mentioned, and going down the bottom are all the issues that we are looking at. And then we are checking off in the X parts, you'll see what categories they fall into. So if it's a hazardous material, code compliance, health, safety, and welfare, it develops the X's across the board. And of course, the more X's you get, the more likely it is that you're going to rise up in the priority for immediate change. We also then work very closely with our cost estimator, and we actually put a line item cost to each of those items to fix that item as a specific item. And then we meet with you as a group, or the facilities people, to talk about what's the priority. How important is it that it's immediately fixed? We set a timeline. If it's immediate, it's a year, within the next year. Is it medium priority? So maybe not this year, but within the next 2 or 3 years. Is it a longer term priority, 5 to 10 years? Or is it something that you just have to maintain that's going to go out there? And so that's the far right-hand side. We begin to develop that list of priorities. And we also work heavily with School Dude. So we know that you're a School Dude community, and we take all our information and we input it into School Dude, which helps with your maintenance and ongoing cost estimating for and budgeting for the coming years. Go ahead. The information that we have developed, the prioritization, that actually gets reflected out in several different ways. This is just one way of letting you know how you're spending your money over the course of a few years. So if you look at the total dollar amount that you're going to spend over the 10 years, that might seem overwhelming. And then if you start looking at what you might spend in the first 2 or 3 years, this is actually for the town of Easton. So in the first year, or actually the first 3 years, we suggested to Easton that they spend $17 million. And we actually made a pie chart to show them exactly which schools they needed to focus on for that $17 million. And then so forth for the next years, and then finally for the longer term piece of this. Now, when we first did our program, Easton came back to us and said, well, we have a brand new high school. Why are we looking at spending $23 million on our high school? It's brand new. And what we showed them was it's new today, but 12 years from now, when you've gone through this entire process, that's when the high school is going to have its needs. So it allows you to begin to make those budgets and program that work. Go ahead. On the lower side, whoops. Jason's going to start and talk to you about the educational programming piece now.
Good evening. Brad introduced me and mentioned that I'm a little bit unique in the industry, and just to quickly sort of expand on that a bit, I started my career as a high school math teacher, and I'm passionate about, this bridge sort of between what happens in the classroom and the facility where it occurs. And so I was actually really pleased to hear the student presentation tonight and to hear about world languages. There were some great nuggets in there that I think will ultimately inform the work that we do. But that's the lens at which I look at your facilities through the educational side of things. And so if you could actually advance to the next slide. Just like with the bricks and mortar, one of the things we hope to provide you with is a series of data analyses so that you have an objective way of understanding how your buildings stack up educationally. One way is to start with an enrollment projection. We understand that NESDEC has been secured to...
It's 8 o'clock.
Yes, it is.
Now serving number 27. The NESDEC's been secured to do another round of enrollment projections, and this is an example from Billerica. What we'll do with those is we'll take a peek at them. We'll see how they relate to high school grade levels, middle school grade levels, elementary school grade levels, and early on in the process we'll establish some enrollment targets so that we have at least some basis for performing additional analyses down the road. You can see the trend lines here, and those 4 numbers for that particular project represent the targets that district established for each one of their grade levels. Then we'll drill down a little bit. We'll look building by building and see what that means for each individual facility. How does the number of students compare to the actual capacity of that building? There's a lot of different ways you can slice capacity. We'll talk about that in just a second. But it's another level of analysis that we'll perform. This is actually data for you based on October 1st, 2015 enrollment. The way you read this capacity analysis, and again, this is just one way of calculating capacity, is as a stoplight metaphor. So you can think of these little black bars as thermometers. If the color is spilling out, it's red, it's probably a capacity issue. If it's yellow, it's maybe okay and within the box. And if it's green, that means there might be some additional capacity available. And so overall, you can see the sort of the elementary schools, and maybe you're experiencing this right now, probably feel a little bit crowded. The middle schools maybe feel okay or are about to be crowded. The high school, maybe there is a little bit of room there. And overall, maybe the square footage is about right. But again, as we get into the process, we'll talk about what this kind of analysis really means. In the case of Billerica, if you're familiar with that district, they had a high school facility that was built for a much larger population than their current enrollment is, and so ultimately chose to do a grade reconfiguration and shift the 8th grade up to the high school, have middle school be 5, 6, and 7, and therefore by doing one project they ultimately solved 2 problems at once. They relieved some of the overcrowding that was occurring at their elementary schools as a result. So that's one sort of thing that an analysis like this can inform. We'll also do a building by building comparative analysis relative to MSBA square footage guidelines. Again, this is a stoplight metaphor. This is not one of your buildings. But what we do is try to indicate in terms of the red, green, yellow, if the space is red, it's more than 10% short of the MSBA guideline. If it's yellow, it falls within a plus 10 or minus % margin. And if it's green, it's oversized by more than 10%. In this case, this particular project was sort of a mixed bag, but it can often tell you what might be possible with an internal renovation. And what I'd like to point to, if you actually look in the sort of the upper right-hand corner, there's what appears to be 3 fifth-grade classrooms there. 2 of them are red and 1 of them is green. So that might be a target for a relatively low-budget renovation project to right-size all 3 of those classrooms in that particular location. So that's a level of information this kind of analysis will reveal. Once we get beyond the analysis, we'll start the process of actually talking to educators, talking to students, talking to the people that are on the ground using the facility. And we'll do that using a mechanism that we call visioning workshops. We haven't yet decided who those people are or how many there are. We'll continue to work with Dr. Lang and the rest of his staff to determine that. But essentially, we try to sort of practice what we preach. Instead of us standing and presenting, the real objective there is to learn and to get information out of you. So we organize those as hands-on workshops. You can sort of see all of the debris in the background of this picture where we've crafted exercises, we've broken up into small groups, we've worked our way through the issue, and then we'll report out to the larger group and see where consensus lies related to whatever the issue is. And you can see that for your district, we've tried to customize these. There's quite a few of them. Some of the big ones we might think about is how big a deal is neighborhood schools? Full-day kindergarten is something that's being considered. How does that impact your facilities? We heard the world languages folks talk about both learning styles and project-based learning. All of those have an impact on what kind of facility and how big spaces need to be. So we'll work our way through all of those issues with these interactive workshops. Coming out of that, we expect to produce these sort of conceptual, idealized plan diagrams. We expect for this project to do sort of one at each grade level, one that applies to the high school, one that maybe applies to both middle schools, and one that applies to elementary schools. But what it tells us is what are the major spaces that need to be housed in facilities if sort of money were no object, and how would they relate one to the other? Right, at the start of this process, at least we're going to live in that, idealized realm, and then we've got a couple examples that we'll show in just a minute of how this can be applied to both new construction and addition renovation. So this will be part of the visioning work as well. And with that, Michelle?
We've come back to a point where the information that Jason has gathered from the visioning workshops and the facilities, we begin to weave that information together and start putting together the options. So, go ahead. One of the things that we do is start looking at each particular site. So we will look at each one of the building options and take a look at site circulation and some of the work that's come out and be very site specific. Go ahead. And then we will also look district-wide. So what you're seeing here in front of you is actually several potential options to solve problems across the district. So the bar across the top explains to you what was existing in this particular district, and you can see that they had 4 schools that were undersized, 2 schools that were correct size, those were the elementary schools, 2 middle schools that were correct size, and a high school that was oversized. This is actually the Bill Ricca option that we were just speaking about. We developed several different options, including adding the pink boxes below the yellow boxes. Those show additions and renovations to the existing elementary schools, closing particular schools, reducing the number of schools, and then ultimately what was chosen, as Jason described, was moving an 8th grade up to the high school, actually constructing a new high school, and that relieved the pressure within the elementary schools. So by making one grade reconfiguration and looking at all the options that we possibly could, we were able to solve a problem that might otherwise have taken 2 or 3 different building projects.
We mentioned public engagement and community outreach a little earlier. The purpose of this slide is to communicate that our approach is to take a similar methodology that we would with the smaller visioning workshops. We don't find it's as effective to just stand and make a presentation once decisions have been made, but rather to actively engage even the general public in some carefully crafted exercises. And so this is an example actually over in the town of Lincoln, where we had a public meeting. About 150 people showed up. We did some small group targeted exercises, and then the bottom 4 images represent the results of those particular exercises. So even with the general public, we expect to do the same sort of interactive approach as we would with a much smaller scale.
The goal of those kinds of meetings is to involve the public early and often. And that way, when it comes to the point where you have told them what your priority is, they fully understand it because they were part of the entire process.
So Michelle mentioned site-by-site options, and we talked about this conceptual idealized plan a little while ago. So what we've done here is demonstrated how this can be translated into conceptual design work. For this one is a new construction option. So there's the shop that we saw a little while ago. It happens to be mirrored left to right and flipped top to bottom, but I think you can see just in the simple color coding that in the conceptual plan diagram we have classrooms to the right clustered into teams. We have all of the public stuff on the left-hand side of the diagram. The green is cafeteria. What's a little bit hard to understand is that the big white square is the top open area of the gym, and the gym is actually below, which is the orange shape. So there's a strong correlation between these two things, even though one was sort of with no bounds and one is much more grounded in reality.
And honestly, by looking at this, you might think that that bubble diagram was contrived after the plan was put together, but it was actually done almost a year
before,
prior to this plan being put together, and it was used as the guide as we went through and developed all the plans for this particular option. And this actually is Needham, and they have submitted their PSR and are waiting to hear from the MSBA to go into schematic design for this project. This method also applies to existing buildings, and if you can go to the next slide there. This is showing a grade grouping of classrooms around a common cluster, and we took this conceptual planning option and applied it, go ahead, to an existing building. You can see this building has classrooms, everything is undersized. It had classrooms with a gym or common space in the middle, and then if you go to the next cluster, and by applying that diagram and doing renovations to the existing building, you can move towards your ultimate goals and method for teaching. Go ahead. So with that in mind, ultimately, there's some funky things happening with our numbers here. Ultimately, what you're going to get at the end of this report is a map to the future, a list of your priorities, the projects, and the order in which you see from this moment to start fixing them or maintain them. And that's what we will develop for you. So we'll go project by project. This will be custom designed to whatever format you want us to do, and we'll begin to move it forward. If you go one more up, you can see that the projects interlay over each other. So if there's a major project, there's also a lot of maintenance happening. So you're going to go out to the community and let them know, yes, we're working on this one piece, but we're not forgetting about all the rest of the schools. We're going to continue to maintain those as we go along. And by having the master plan, you'll be able to budget for all of those pieces.
I also think it's important to note that we're not going to come in and just make this decision and drop it on you and say, congratulations. It's an iterative process. You know, what we're able to determine is, you know, by going through this, is that we develop the needs assessment based on the existing conditions of your building. We really now have been able to suss out, you know, what the educational drivers are, and, you know, where maybe some of the shortcomings are, and how you may want to address that, and whether those things can be addressed with your existing building inventory, or whether changes need to be. And then it also needs to factor in, because while we've talked a little bit about this kind of idealized approach, you know, we have to step back and then realize that, you know, we have to pay for these things, and now we factor, you know, in the financial piece of this, and then we start to make some of those decisions and develop what those priorities are. And so when we start to do that, and that's the iterative part, we may go down and say, okay, well, we want to do project X, whatever that may be. In order to do that and put that on the front burner, so to speak, then something else needs to come in as the second priority. And so in order to be able to maintain the kind of the status quo with that, we may have to do some things to shore that up. And so what this plan allows you to do is it allows you to, once we start to hone in through all of those iterations, develop what is going to need to be required both in terms of learning objectives, facility requirements, and financial constraints, and try and map that out. Here, we're talking about 10 years, and what we find is it really starts off, everybody goes through and says, okay, this all makes sense, and start down that path. We really encourage people, and most of the clients that we've worked with like to go back and revisit that, and typically when we talk about if it was a new project, renovation or addition, and you go through the pipeline with the MSBA, that's a 6.5 year process from soup to nuts. So it takes a while, it takes commitment, and so there is a process here that you have to go through, and because of that time, if you follow that period of 6.5 years, a lot changes. I was a much younger guy 6.5 years ago, and so the same thing's going to happen with some of your buildings, and you're going to want to go back and look at that and say, well, what's changed? And so you revisit that, tweak it a little bit, and then you can move forward with that for what you're doing on the next 10 years. So it really is, like we said earlier, it's a tool for you to be able to use, as you really start to plan this, and it's, I think, something that you'll find really starts to make life a little bit more understandable in terms of a very large, inventory of buildings, which you have. I mean, I think you have somewhere around 750,000 square feet of buildings, somewhere in that range. That's a lot of building to manage, and there's a lot of things at different stages which you need to understand to make sure that everything's working properly, best that you can, and that you're delivering the education that you want to deliver. I think that, if we go to the next slide.
I think the next one's
Look at
just those
that.
questions.
If I can for a second, from my perspective, as we went through this, I think Joan Whittier's process that they talked about kind of working with us on really struck the review team. I think it was the combination of both the facilities assessment as well as the educational programming that equally balanced each other. That was really attractive to us. I think the process was very methodical and understandable to both the team as well as trying to involve the community in this. They hit on all the various points. So I was very pleased to review the proposals and obviously witness the presentations, and I'm happy to bring that forward tonight as a recommendation, and to have you answer or ask any questions you may have directly of the group, because this is a group that you have to be comfortable with as well, because we're going to be working very closely together for the next 6 months.
So where do you start? When do you start?
Well, you're going to tell us a little bit about that, we hope. But we're ready to hit the ground, right away. I think that, given the holiday coming up, and trying to make sure that we, meet schedule expectations, we'd like to get going pretty soon after, the new year. And, if in fact, we're able to, get forward with that and, you vote us through, then, we would start working with the superintendent and his team to develop that schedule. We recognize, that you have an ongoing operation there, and we have to work around that. We're pretty used to that. So, once the time schedule gets laid out, we would start doing that, after hours and on off days, and we have the team of our consultants as well, the engineers and everything. We get them lined up, and that usually takes, we're able to get through the building side in about, probably 1 to 1.5 weeks. Pretty quickly, but that's just the field work. Then the real work also has to go, as Emily can attest, is to take that and start to digest it and analyze it and figure out, well, where do we go from here just on the facility side, and that too is iterative back and forth with the district and our team, and then again we'll work out the schedule on the educational side as well, and while I think this process really probably is about 6 months to be able to get to that final report. We want to let you know that we understand that there's a longer process here in terms of developing what you want to do, and we're along for that ride as well. We want to make sure, we want to be your go-to firm for, being able to do this, and then, hopefully if you have a plan moving forward, that you'll consider us for that as well. So, we're not going away. We'll stick with you to make sure that we get this thing in the shape that you need it in.
How often can we expect updates?
Well, I guess, that'll be defined for this committee. That'll be defined, working with the superintendent. What we have to, I think, do is get into it a little bit more to understand what some of those objectives are and what makes the most sense for you. But, we'll work that out and, make sure that not only is this group informed, but one of the things, that Jason was alluding to, when you're embarking on this, I think there's a certain level, and you're going to help define what this is in terms of community engagement, but a certain level of transparency that's important, because you're going to be able, you're going to want the support of the community, okay, to be able to implement things that this master plan is leading you towards. And so the more engagement and the more, for lack of a better term, buy-in that you can get at the community while this is being developed is good. So we want to support that process. I think it needs to be managed so that it doesn't get kind of wonky by having too much input. But I think that we've been doing this now for a long time, that we have a pretty good handle on being able to help guide you on what a reasonable level of community interaction is. But that's something we'll work with you on.
I'm thinking is, we have town meeting at the end of April, and we'd love to be able to have something significant to report. Use the word wonky, and I think that's an appropriate word, because we've had our battles in the last few years. So their reception is going to be, it's going to be a delicate thing.
Yeah. Well, we typically can work as fast as you guys can make decisions, but I think it really serves you well, okay, to make sure that there's a real comprehensive understanding that everybody is bought in on how you want to approach these things. So it's when we talk about designing buildings and building buildings and building that foundation, this is the foundation for all of that work that you want to go and pursue, whether it's maintenance, new buildings, for the next 10 years. So it's worth it to go and spend the time and make sure you get it right. So if you get to April or whenever your town meeting is, and it's something where you can report on what the status is of this.
That's all I'm suggesting.
We'd love to do that.
Right.
If we really killed it and it's all done because it went so much smoother than we ever anticipated, maybe we'll be there too. But we're ready to support you in whatever the case may be.
Well, your timeline shows the first report, the initial report, the summary of the facility and site assessment and the educational programs and visioning. That should be done around March 1st, right? So that'd be plenty of time to have meetings on that and put it out there for town meeting. Kind of on the post or extra report support that we'd get from you, can you talk a little bit about what we'd be looking at if we do go with an MSBA project? Clearly that'd be down the road. What kind of relationship would we have with your firm to get support for something like that? Is that another contract, another report? Do you?
Well, there's a very well thought process with the MSBA, as you may be familiar with, and I think this is the first step in that process is the SOI process, and I think what this is doing is it's giving you the information, the tools to really put together a very comprehensive and well thought document to the MSBA. And then out of that, I think what the MSBA will tell you is, they're not looking to go and have all of the solutions, lined up and ready to go. In fact, they're going to go and say, we want you to go through a lot of the things that you may have already gone and done as a result of this master plan. But that's, kind of something that they want to vet along the way, and sometimes things change. The relationship with our firm can be whatever you want it to be. We work with communities to do the planning stage, to assist them, at putting SOIs together, and then when, hopefully, we would be in a position, if we've done a good job, to, try and continue on. But that's something that is between, you and the town, then ultimately, the MSBA itself through its designer selection process.
So what, just so I understand, so what we're talking about here is this project is basically going to be the basis for an SOI. It won't be, it's not going to come fully fledged right away. We're gonna have to look at this. We're gonna have to think about it, and then we're gonna build on what we get here, if we want to propose a project to the MSBA.
Yeah, what the MSBA process is you go and you propose, put an SOI in, and then based on that, yeah, you can
The next slide actually shows the process.
that. Look at that. We were on top
It's like
of that
you
one.
guys
Huh?
have done this before.
The first step there, as I was saying, is, you get invited, okay, on the basis, with everybody else within the Commonwealth, kind of being in there, into what they call the eligibility period, which is a period for 270 days. And that's really, starting to, essentially kicking off the process with them. And then if that all is going well and they bring you to the next step, then you'll start to pick your project team, and the first person on that path is the owner's project manager, and then the designer. And then once you've got that project team, then you move into the next series of modules, which is essentially doing a lot of the work that we've done here, but presenting it in the MSBA format. And there's really no way around that, But what it does, I think, is it really is a foundation for you, again, moving into that process, because even though 6.5 years sounds like a long time, that first year is going to go pretty quick, and there's a lot of information to absorb. So you're very well prepared at that point, to take that information and, maybe, you're sorting it out a little bit different way, and different things may come out of it. But you're in a pretty good position, and then you go through the rest of the process, and if you get approved by the board, and then you have 120 days to have that your portion of that approved by the committee, by the town, then you're off and running, and that's when the real fun starts.
And Mike, if I can just add, maybe I think you're asking a more specific question. Right now, I think our scope of services falls just short of preparing the statement of interest or helping you prepare the statement of interest. And it's not been uncommon with our previous clients that we've had a similar contractual relationship for the comprehensive facility assessment, and then do some agreement, after that to assist with the statement of interest itself.
Right.
So you would also be reviewing, say, like our capital plans going forward to see whether or not that also fits in with what it is that you see when you evaluate our buildings? Because when you had talked about a maintenance plan, and that's going forward, and what maybe we may be able to do if we ever have a building project versus what we would be doing in terms of the maintenance and any other types of things. So you would be taking a look at that to see whether or not we're on the right track.
We would, and I think what this process will allow you is it's going to give you a whole bunch of additional information, so that plan, may morph into something that it can be very different from that, and not only incorporate the maintenance, but also incremental capital additions to your buildings as may be required, again, through that iterative process, so that you really do have a tool to look at that, that's been prioritized over, 10 years plus or minus.
Because with the capital plan that we've had from the past, going forward, is that it pretty much of what we've done to our buildings started in 1995-96. We had a plan moving forward, and then that's where capital built on it, and then the school committee set priorities on what levels we were going to address. And then went in 98 and did some other types of work, very similar to what you're doing.
I
So
think
I'm going to be
that's
very
right.
interested to see how your evaluation is in comparison to what I saw happen a while ago. Because it's very similar. What I like more in terms of what you're doing is wanting to involve the public more often. Because a lot of times, a lot of the work is done and people aren't paying attention, and then when the suggestions are brought forward, they're like, where did this come from, and how did this happen, and what are you doing, and why are you spending my money this way? But having those incremental meetings and everything, the status reports coming up. That's extremely important for what it is we'd like to see happen.
We agree.
Do you folks have anything?
There's a lot of conversation about the inside of the building naturally and inside of the facilities. You do anything on the outside, whether it's curbing or entryways, and we're going to be able to see opportunities like that, right down to, parking lots that need to be redone. I think that's important. So many people, our taxpayers, they don't get a chance to get inside the schools, but they look from the outside, and sometimes people eat with their eyes, and the outside is very important.
Oh, sure. I mean, we have a civil engineer on our team that will be going through, as we were saying, it's not just building assessments, it's site assessments too. So, we will be looking at all of those things like, parking, condition of parking lots. Is site circulation, for example, working effectively? Is something, do we have any conflicts from a safety perspective on drop-offs for parents versus bus drop-offs? Looking at utilities of the building, do we have the right level of service? Coming into these buildings, both for today and what you might expect if some of these, capital improvements, take place going forward. So all those things are addressed as part of the report.
And once again, if Dr. Lang or our chairman or this board needs you to go in front of the town and just articulate exactly the condition of, maybe it's a boiler, and if you don't allocate the money now, you can expect 4 times the amount of money being spent in X number of years. Is that something that you feel comfortable in doing? Because I think that's really important for people to know that if we got on the right maintenance plan now, that it would be the right thing to do, as opposed to spending much more money down the road.
Yeah, it's something we're comfortable with, and I think we've developed a number of different ways or tools, as Jason and Michelle were discussing, so that it's understandable for people, and not just understandable in terms of kind of technical, because not everybody out there is an electrician or a plumber or an HVAC technician, but understandable for the general public. Okay, to be able to get all of that information and say, okay, I get it.
That's right.
And so sometimes, we have to boil that down and, frame it so that everybody walks away with that understanding. Because if we're not able to communicate that effectively, then we've just wasted time. So we really do need to be able and to work with, everybody. And again, it's interactive so that people walk away and they do understand, because you need their support if you're going to implement this.
Thank you.
Robert, do you have any?
I'm good, thank you.
I just have a couple of comments. First of all, I hope a lot of people watch tonight, because some of the critics of the $200,000 said, why don't you just walk around the buildings and look and see? And this, the breadth of this study and the depth of this study should make it clear to those people it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think one other thing that's really important, when we began this thing, that the facility part of the project gets the big play. We're looking at buildings, and I think that's part of what we want, but the other part is to tie the program for our students and the facilities together, and that's where you come in. And so I think the presence of you in this process is very important also. I'm done.
No, like I said, I don't want to belabor it. I think this firm will do excellent work with us. I think from a deliverable standpoint, to Mike's question, this will get us right to the SOI stage. And to Evelyn's question, this really will provide us our capital plan for the next 10 years. And when we do decide to submit an application to the SBA with an SOI, we'll have all of the backup to assist in that application. And, we'll be in a much better light and much more informed when we go to make that, because of all of this work. Then after the SOI, everything kind of starts up again. But this will get us to that point. And again, I do think it's about process. I think once we can actually enter into a contract with this firm, we can then provide you, what the scope of services is and the timelines. You can kind of see when the committee is going to receive updates. There'll be working groups, there'll be focus groups. Get all of that information, and we can then convey that to the public. But I think one of the critical steps tonight, hopefully, is to get your support. And there are 2 pieces to this that I outlined. One is that we do need the NASDAQ enrollment projection, because that is going to be a basis for a lot of our work around student enrollment. And we need to really have that broken down by school because of our current assignment policy. We need to know at one particular school, based on geography, what's going to be happening in that neighborhood enrollment-wise. So I do have a proposal from NASDAQ, and I've talked to them, and we've started gathering their information. But of the $200,000 that's been allotted to this project, I'm seeking approval to execute a contract with them for $6,173 to be able to conduct that study, the demographics and enrollment projections for all of our schools, and then a separate authorization to enter into a contract with Dorn Whittier for the $193,827, and that's the total of the $200,000 that was appropriate, or that was approved for this project. So I would seek that as approval this evening from you, to then allow me to go and finalize contracts and scopes of services and be able to get them on board and actually then commit to a schedule to begin right after the first of the year.
Make a motion that we approve the contract of $193,827 to Dorr and Whittier and the $6173 to NASDAQ.
Is it okay if they're together?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on this? Hearing none, all in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Okay,
Congratulations.
Thank you very much tonight.
Thank you very much.
for the
We look
presentation.
forward to working with you.
I look forward to you explaining this to everyone.
Yeah. Convincing. Convincing would be a better word.
You can lead a horse to water.
okay, the next thing on our agenda is discussion of our goals. If you turn to that sheet that's part of your packet, I'm discussing how to handle this with the superintendent. And I think that there was agreement with some of the people in the committee beforehand that we will work from this document. If you've picked up ideas from other documents or things that aren't on any of the documents, we can try to work them in. But we were afraid if we didn't put this parameter on it, that it would go all over the place. So, with your cooperation, I'd like to just start with, number one, see if it's a goal that we want to continue, and is there any modification that we want to make to it. Policy is sort of important, seeing it's one of our three things, so we probably should leave something in about policy.
And just to remind people, the 70 policies a year is a number that's sufficient to ensure that we do all the policies in 3 years, so that anybody coming on the committee would see each policy at least once.
Is it worth just reading it out, sir?
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Chairman? Just so the people at home that might not be following
Okay.
on the computer.
Sure. I'll read it as it is. By June 2015, the Chelmsford School Committee will act to maintain a current policy handbook by reviewing and reaffirming at least 70 policies as measured by agenda items, meeting minutes, and online policies. The Chelmsford School Committee will distribute to each member a complete and current set of policies. So, from your comments, Mr. Regan, I would assume that you're okay with leaving number, yeah. Does anyone have a concern about any part of it, whether it needs to be modified or clarified in any way?
No, you just want to change the date to 2016.
Right. Okay.
And this may be one of those ongoing goals. Well, once we achieve getting all of them done, then we can reevaluate to see how we may want to modify it slightly. This was set in place just to make sure that we got through it at least once.
Do you have any sense of how many we've done?
No,
Okay.
In the
sorry.
last year,
Yeah.
we've done quite a few.
less than 20. And
Well-
most of
Well,
those,
we have a-
most of those have been in the last couple of months. No,
We have a lot sitting in queue.
we now have a
Now.
lot sitting in the queue. Yeah, I mean, look, we didn't achieve these goals last year.
We had an awful
and-
lot of other things on our
and
plate.
we had some
Yeah.
other things that took our attention away.
We kept trying to put them out there.
Well, also, people get a sense of what's involved, that we approved minutes on 3 subcommittee meetings.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of time that's gone into
lot
the
of
ones.
hours.
Yeah, a lot of time. Okay, so.
Can I just,
Yeah, sure.
so we put a number over there of 70 policies, correct? We placed a number. Now, just putting out that this is an attainable goal. I'm a new person to the group here. You have a lot of experience. I mean, Is it 70? Is it 80? Is it 60? You know, what is attainable?
I don't think we've had a good year to evaluate that. This, as I recall, that number was put in place last year. That was the first time we tried to attach a number to it, and we utterly failed. But
How
again,
much
it
did
was
you utterly, like, what were you close to?
We did a handful, really. And by June 2015, we might have done 5.
Well, I don't know if
but
I think we did more than that, but.
No, I really don't think we did. I
So
mean,
we
you can
did
go
5
back and
last
look
year, you want
through
to do
the
70
minutes.
this year?
We did considerably more than that the year before. Look, we lost a year, right? I mean, that's the real takeaway. I think we need to be honest with ourselves and with others about, did we meet these goals last year? And we didn't, right? And that's not the only one we didn't meet. But there were outstanding or extraordinary circumstances. I think we need to, again, the basis, the rationale for using 70 is that that's a big enough number that in 3 years we would see each one, right? So no matter when you come on the committee, if we maintain that as a goal, each committee member will see the entire set of policies in a 3-year term, right? So that they get a chance to think and speak and act on every single policy that we have. That's the rationale for it. Is it, should it be 60 or 80 instead? Let's have a good year. I think we're well on the way this year. If you look at what we've done already we've done more this year than we did last year, and that's not starting until August or September.
On behalf of the policy subcommittee, however, we have certainly reviewed more than 70 policies. They are waiting to be presented to the committee.
Yeah, there's
and
quite
we
a few.
didn't have time last year to do that. That was never going to be a priority last year.
No, and in fact, once
It bumped it.
I mean,
Oh, yeah.
like the financial policies, we deliberately held them.
Right.
Even though I believe the policy subcommittee had reviewed them, but we knew that there was going to be other input that we wanted to wait. Yeah.
Right,
there's
but
no
we also
question.
went through all the 3s, and we went through half of the 2000s within 2014, so, which is the 2014, 2015. But with all the different things that happened last year, we put them on the back burner because it was just too much on the agendas to be able to do them. This way, though, we are addressing them on a regular basis, and when they are on the regular basis, we'll see this year, because we're being far more aggressive with it, if it's realistic. And it's a flexible number. I mean, we say 70, but, if we can't do 70, we can't do them. The main goal is to get all of them reviewed, to be within a 3-year time frame of all the dates on the bottom, so that we can actually get them on a CD for everybody.
Okay.
That's the real goal.
I think maybe we should consider a work session or something to
Sure.
pound out policy, just to vote on it, just to review it and to, look at the changes we were suggesting.
Well, I think it depends on the policies, right? I mean, some of them, you're right, just need to be reaffirmed.
Right.
Others, the real changes need to happen,
Yep.
and I think that work should be done, it should probably be done at a regular meeting.
Yeah, and we could televise a work session.
Yeah, well, that's true. That's a good point.
So my understanding, the consensus seems to be that we would change the date and leave the rest of it as it is.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Number 2, by June 2015, the Chelmsford School Committee will demonstrate effective communication to the community, students, parents, and school district staff by holding a number of public forums, including one which will be geared to seniors in the community, and another will focus on outreach to the Chelmsford business community by uploading all school committee documents, minutes, and announcements to the website on at least a quarterly basis, and each member will attend at least 3 other public events, including the district opening day, graduation, open houses, school visits, and community events as measured by agenda items, liaison reports, and meeting minutes.
This one, we
think
did.
we did.
We did
I
a
mean,
reasonably good job.
the
of,
public meetings, maybe
The
not.
one thing we did not do was have an outreach session focused on the Chelmsford business community.
Right.
But I think it was clear from the meeting minutes and the liaison reports that people got to at least 3. That's a number we could maybe consider increasing, depending on how people feel about it. Most of us
We go to a
do
lot of
3
stuff.
standing
I
in
think
our head.
we're well over that
Yeah,
number on
So,
average.
I mean,
don't
we
think.
could think about increasing that one.
I would just comment in terms of the business community that it was one of my responsibilities, and I contacted Mr. Harrington and made it clear that we'd come anytime they wanted, and apparently they didn't want us. No, I think we probably need to be more aggressive and say, we'd like to come in and establish that relationship, which is a little bit different, but we did try to meet with them.
Do we want to keep that, or do we just want to, do we want to keep that focus on the seniors and the business community, or do we want to just say we're going to have a number of?
Oh, at the last
Public
meeting, it came up that
input.
when we had a meeting at the senior center,
Nobody came.
Nobody came.
Right.
Nobody
So-
came, but they're very vocal in,
Yeah.
at town meeting.
Yeah.
Right, but we don't, I mean, other people could have come to the senior center as well. I mean, it was deliberately scheduled for the morning, which I think made it harder for the school some of the school-age parents to come. Maybe instead of having it, at the senior center or at the CBA, if we had a theme or a particular focus of the evening, and kind of say, we'd like to hear about business concerns tonight, right? Or we'd like to, if you have a particular idea about how the schools interact with the seniors in town, tonight we especially want to hear it. We want to hear it any night, but tonight, that's going to be kind of our focus question. Instead of, and then just have it at the regular time, and anybody from the community
Right.
can come.
Maybe we could make it more broad-based by changing the language to something to the effect that we would meet with representative groups such as, and so that if we didn't hit seniors or didn't hit
Sure.
one of those, we might hit others, and it would be more a long-standing article, I would think. Other than that, any concern about making other changes?
No.
All right, moving to number 3, obviously the date. By June 2015, the Chelmsford School Committee will provide direction and guidance to the superintendent for implementation of the strategic plan by hearing at least one report per month on the status of the plan as measured by agendas, meeting minutes, and annual action plans.
I think this year, it would be appropriate to change that, right? And replace the strategic plan with the superintendent's entry plan.
Oh, yeah.
And do we need, understood broadly, we hear a lot more than one report a month. On the other hand, the entry plan has some specific goals and highlights, and maybe we're not going to get one report a month on those, just because there's a limited number of them.
Well, I think changing it to the entry plan is perfect, because it is much more in line with how I'm kind of assessing things. In that entry plan, I laid out certain kind of benchmarks or times I was going to come back to you with reports. So I think those would be kind of the formal report outs on where we are with the entry plan. Yeah, but there are different reports each month that I am giving you that kind of tie into it. So if you're okay with that, I'm certainly fine with that. And I think there's actually a report out at the end of January, early February on kind of initial findings. So, I mean, that will be coming. If I can, maybe I'll just tweak the wording a little bit on this to kind of have it tie into entry plan things. That's fine with me.
You all set in the rest of that? Okay. Number 4, by June 2015, the Chelmsford School Committee will demonstrate fiscal responsibility and will be effective advocates for the school district by holding at least one meeting to review the fiscal year 15 operating budget, including public input on the proposed budget and guidance for the business manager on the format and content of the annual budget report to the spring town meeting, and by holding at least one meeting or workshop discussing the capital plan budget and publicly voting that budget as measured by agendas, meeting minutes, and the annual budget report to town meeting.
Well,
We do this all the time.
we are
Every year.
obliged to
We have
That's
no
all
option
stuff
to
that
meet
we-
those goals. In some ways, that's a low bar, but we did in fact meet them last year, and I think it's a good basis. I would like to add something to the fiscal goals, and I don't know whether you'd prefer to add it into the SMART goals or put it down in the other points of emphasis. ASBO, which is the Association of School Business Officials, gives out a meritorious budget award. This is the thing I would compare it to is an ISO 9000 certification. It looks at your budget process as well as the budget itself, and it would be a significant award for us. I think there are only still a half dozen, maybe a dozen communities in this state that have gotten that award at this point. I think if we could achieve that, that would go a long way towards being a strong piece of evidence for the community that we're taking the budget very seriously. I don't believe that that's a realistic goal in the first year, but they do also have a pathway to the Meritorious Budget Award, which communities or districts are eligible for the first 2 years of application to the process. I know, Michelle, you've looked at this. I would like to make that part of our financial goals, and whether that, the thing is, it's not something that we would necessarily do. It would take some work on the administration's part. So I think what we're looking for, or what I'd be looking for as a deliverable, is the actual application itself. I think we could support that. Whether it's better to be done as something like the NEASC point of emphasis, or actually put into the goals itself, I'd like to hear other people's thoughts on, but I think it would also be appropriate, Michelle, if you wanted to talk about that and your opinion on going after something like that.
While this is definitely a goal, and it's a personal goal of mine, it is a multi-year goal. And
Absolutely.
certainly we are not even close to a point where I could devote that type of time for the immediate year. Certainly we can try to take the steps and, work towards that. Absolutely, but a goal for this coming June is probably
To put in an application or for the award itself? I don't expect the award to be the goal.
I don't even think, I've never actually undertaken the application process. I don't know if Dr. Lang has experience with that.
No, I've looked, to be quite honest with you, I've looked at it. It's been, I've never even applied for it after running a budget for 12 years that I've been comfortable with. If you'd, to be quite honest with you, I would be much more comfortable if you wanted that to be something considered, to maybe do it as a point of emphasis as opposed to a goal. Because when you do look at the school committee's goals, your goals are really supposed to be within your purview to kind of have full control over. And it's awkward when your goals are really kind of either directing or having either myself or Michelle have to do something. It's just very difficult to report out and then actually kind of grade. It gets messy.
So you're not going to get us a Pulitzer Prize this year, is that what?
Not this year.
Okay.
Maybe next year.
All right.
It's something certainly to shoot for. And I mean, I think even, well, we could look at some mid-range steps. I mean, even within Massachusetts, like MASBO, the Massachusetts group, as opposed to ASBO, the national group, has different awards, or different criteria that they set out around budget format and process and planning. That would be a first step to try to actually align ourselves even just with the state standards and try to get in line to be able to receive some recognition from them. And then when you get to such a point that you feel like your budget's in good order, and a lot of it really goes into, what's kind of the depth and breadth of the budget. Are you looking at, historicals? How comfortable are you with the historicals you'd be providing? Your budget narratives have to be really succinct and strong. It takes, to be quite honest, like an office of people dedicated to budget, which we don't have. to really be able to put a lot of that work together. I'd be, we can list that as a point of emphasis. I can get back to you to talk to you about what MASBO differences would be, to tell you what's a little more realistic for possibly this year's budget. And then we could talk about the ASBO recognition being a longer-term goal, and try to weave that in. I just don't want to set up false hope that that's kind of viable for the current year.
Jay? Mike, I apologize for pushing back a little bit, but these are goals that we as a board are trying to attain. To your point, how do we attain something that's in somebody else's control that we can't control? That these are goals that we, this five-member board, can control. I'm just concerned, Michael, that something like this it's beyond our control, and it'd be a lot of pressure to say, okay, Jay, we are now demanding you allocate resources to this because this is one of our goals. I just want to point
I agree
that
with that, and I think you're not entirely wrong, and that's why I started by saying I don't know that it's necessarily appropriate to put it as one of the SMART goals, but I think you can make the same case for the NEASC certification. That is not something that anybody on this committee does. That's something that we support, and it's something that we direct the superintendent and through him the administration and the rest of the district to pursue, because we think it's important, and that's why it's in the other points of emphasis. And I'm completely okay with taking that approach for this sort of external benchmark for our financial process. But I think it is important that we have some kind of external benchmark like that. And I think one of the things that happened to us was we got too far into our own loop, too far inside, and we were perfectly happy with what we were doing. We never compared it to what was being done elsewhere. So we didn't have a realistic sense of whether we had a good process or a mediocre process. I actually think the process that we had was better than what had come before. But what we saw last year is that that's not good enough.
And I guess my only takeaway would be, like, there are steps to take to get there. And even on the NEASC point of emphasis, I take that as the superintendent, you're telling me it's very important to maintain the level of professional development that's required to be able to have the high school maintain its NEASC. And the same thing, say, with the budget award, is that, you would like to see me and Michelle be working with you to make sure that our budget starts to line up with those standards and expectations. I think that almost kind of recognizes, though, that a point of emphasis, can be something that can take a few years. It'll be our
absolutely.
emphasis for a little while.
Right.
Where really the top four should be achieved by June of 16. So we should be able to go in this summer and actually say, yes, you did this.
Right.
The same way I'll be able to go into mine and say, yes, I did this, no, I need to work on this. Where the points of emphasis, I think, can go from year to year. So if you'd like, I could try to, work with Michelle and craft something around that similar to NEASC and bring it back to you as a recommendation when we incorporate the final document.
I'd be very
That would
happy
be,
with- I'd be very
and I'll
happy
look at
with
the
that.
MASBO thing, too, because I think that's, in the short term, more realistic.
Okay.
So we can look at a combo on that.
So would you also have under other points of emphasis, instead of goals, that we would be holding multiple meetings dealing with the feasibility study and the status reports, and that one of the goals is to have them do a presentation of status at the town meeting? Would that be under points of emphasis, or would that be under?
Isn't the comprehensive facilities assessment part of your
It's
entry
part of
plan?
my entry plan.
So then that would fall under that, but it would be just a detail?
It's technically like one of my goals for the year, and you will be getting those updates.
Okay.
And, they will be presenting it at town meeting to give updates. So that is kind of already tied into my goal.
Okay, that's, I
So
just
you will
wanted to
be
make sure
getting
we
it.
had, yeah.
I thought maybe in this first one, which we've indirectly gotten to on points of emphasis, that instead of tying support to just the NEASC recommendations, but to consider support or something like that for recommendations from appropriate groups, because we've got, Barbara went through the recommendations that came from the various organizations to see which ones, the financial recommendations and so forth, to see which ones we'd carried out and which ones we haven't. at some point, we probably should take a look at that, but it might be longer lasting and more valuable if we just broaden that a bit.
That's in my goal.
Oh, okay.
That's in my entry plan.
All right. Took care of that.
I think we're well
It's done.
covered.
We're good, because that's part of my work for the year is to kind of
Yeah,
go
okay.
through all those audits and
All right.
assessments and do that.
One of the other things is a survey. Do you want to keep that?
When was the last time we did an online
I
survey?
know.
The last
Well, we
time
didn't want to do one last year.
School calendar, school calendar,
Which was, I think,
2 years.
2, maybe 3, yeah. I mean, the last time we had this discussion, I think there was a sense that we do a voter survey. But I'd be happy to do more online surveys if we don't have something to some focus though. It's rather vague.
Right. Full-day kindergarten, did we do one?
We did at
We did a
well,
while
that
ago.
was done as part of the as part of the
Feasibility study?
feasibility study. I mean, we could do one around homework holidays.
Well, we can do one whether we have this here or not. It's a question of whether it's a point that we want to give emphasis to. And
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you, compared to some other things, it's not for me. But it's up to you folks.
Well, and I'm just throwing this out there, I mean, could that be broadened to talk about the school committee wanting to continue to solicit and elicit feedback from the community in
Yeah.
whatever form? I mean, public participation, people can come to meetings, you might use a survey if a particular instance comes up and you want to get some feedback. There's ways to even do phone surveys through the Connect Ed system. I don't know if you want to possibly just make that, more of a goal
If that
around.
goes into goal number 2, then you're saying, instead of as a point of emphasis?
Oh, the effective communication, yeah.
I mean, we could say we'll do, since those are supposed to be SMART goals, I think we should pick a number. We should say we'll do at least one online survey or at least one parent survey, something like that. Then it doesn't have to be online, it could be phone. I mean, I wasn't really aware that you could do something with the Connect Ed system, so maybe that would be an interesting thing to do. On the other hand, people don't really like robocalls, so. So it might
Especially at
be-
election time.
It might be something we want to talk about a little bit more, but if we said, in addition to the public forums, we had at least one, parent survey or community survey?
Yeah.
And you may want an online survey with some of the results coming out of the feasibility study to see what people think in terms of evaluating or prioritizing where we're going to go with that.
Did we use SurveyMonkey for that?
We did.
Okay.
We still have a lot on the agenda.
I know, but we have some of the things that's here. What we could do is have rewrite or add to this and bring it back on the next agenda and continue.
Okay.
Because I didn't know whether or not you wanted to add for this year. I mean, obviously, we're already, we're in FY16, and we already had one workshop with MASC, and we're thinking about at least having one more, if not 2 more with them this year, that's focused on goals and self-evaluation and financial matters, because there's still a lot of questions. We might want to bring them back in for that. We talked about having them do that. That's a goal.
You don't think we're close to checking off this whole page right now? Like,
Yeah. Well, this last, I think we want to keep the last one, but maybe modified to make it more up to date because of, the work that we're going to be doing. Maybe reference to continued work with the town's maintenance if it's a subcommittee, but a group or whatever, and maybe reference to the assessment that we haven't
Other
done.
facilities,
Yeah.
perfect.
Okay, so we made progress on that, but we'll obviously be coming back to it.
Yeah, I mean, if the rewrites got done between now and the next meeting, if you just wanted to bring a document forward, we could just take an up or down vote on it next week.
Sounds good.
Or the next meeting and not spend a lot of time.
Well said, Michael.
Okay. Spring assessment recommendation.
Thank you. Yes, this is item number 4 before you tonight. Linda had prepared a memo. We started talking at the last school committee meeting about our two options for the spring. And we have the option of either staying with MCAS or switching to Park for this year. We have had a series of staff meetings and talked to people in the district over the course of the last couple weeks since the meeting to kind of gauge their opinions on things. And the feeling basically, and I think I mentioned this at the last meeting, is well, we don't know exactly what the format of MCAS 2.0 will look like that is supposed to come out in the spring of 17. Personally, my recommendation is to keep with MCAS for this year, to not do a change to Park for 16 and then have to do another change in 17, to basically wait it out a year, continue with MCAS, and then wait for the guidance from the DOE about what MCAS 2.0 is going to look like, instead of making the two wholesale changes and having to ramp up and do PD and training and get everyone's kind of angst level up. That's our recommendation for this year, to stick with that, and just to be mindful and watchful about what's going to happen with MCAS 2.0. They have indicated that there's going to be a few changes, so we'll be able to get some sense of the flavor of the questions. I believe it's 4th and 7th grade, Linda, they're dropping the long comp, and it's going to be more Park related.
Yeah, so they're going to drop the long composition for grades 4 and 7 only, and they're going to augment the tests with Park-like questions. And it's our understanding that it would be more of that short answer piece for Park.
So even sticking with the MCAS, you're going to start to get a little bit of a flavor of what some of the question changes would be. But I think, quite honestly, that would be the best course of action for us for this year. So my recommendation would be to remain with MCAS in 16 and to communicate that to the DOE.
I had a conversation with Jay last week, and I talked at the last meeting about pursuing Park to see if we truly are ready, and I asked if we can do some kind of a hardware audit to see where we stand to administer any kind of electronic test.
I'll entertain a motion.
I make a motion to follow Dr. Lang's advice to stay with MCAS for the next 2 years. Was it 2 years?
Just for the spring, 16.
Yeah,
And then wait to see what the DOE does the year after.
2016.
Second. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote on that motion. All in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposition? Unanimous.
Flying now. On to the next item. And Michelle can certainly speak to this and answer questions. When we met in September, we had a report, and then we also had a follow-up finance subcommittee, and we talked about some of the budget-related issues, and one that was that we were keeping a close eye on was the special education out-of-district tuition, and we indicated at that point in time we'd come back every couple of months and give you an update. So this is the latest update as of 2 weeks ago. If you recall from the memo, and this is uploaded into your electronic packet as well. We determined that the tuition at the time would have been $6.8 million. Of that, there were 5 potential out-of-district student placements. They were in mediation at the time. And we told you that we would actually update that list too, so that we were kind of better tracking this information. 2 of those 5 potential students have gone to out-of-district placements. 1, it was decided that they would stay in district, and the district was the best place for them, and the other 2 are still in mediation. So 2 went out, 1 remained, and 2 are still in play at this point in time. So with the 2 going out, that brings the tuition budget line need to $6.9 million. And there has been other activity also within SPED for the last 2 months. Frustrating that some is within our control and some isn't within our control. So if you look in the middle part of the memo, there were 2 additional students that were placed out of district by state agencies. Basically, we have no control over this. Department of Children and Families, DCF, will take a Chelmsford student, place them in an out-of-district placement, and then the district is financially responsible for those placements. So those 2 placements are noted. We have another student. Michelle, do you mind that I'm doing this, or did you want to?
No, go right ahead.
Okay. We have another student that is actually programmatically the responsibility of another district, but Chelmsford remains fiscally responsible for that student, and that has the cost of the $49,405. 2 additional students from out of town have moved into Chelmsford since, and we're already in out-of-district placements. Their IEPs call for that. We then, because they're public placements, we immediately become fiscally responsible for those 2 placements. The same thing does happen, however, it doesn't happen as often, where a Chelmsford student moves to another community. It seems like we don't receive a lot of those students happening. But when it does happen, the other district becomes responsible immediately too, so there are those costs. On a positive note, one student did graduate from an out-of-district placement that hadn't been earmarked, so that was about a $30,000 savings. The DOE then did approve rate increases to some of the out-of-district programs back on October 1st. So you see an uptick in tuition, that's the $87,000 there. And there were several students that ended up being a net savings of $68,000 because of different adjustments within the IEP. Service levels were adjusted, so there was a little savings there. I know it's a lot of information to take in, but just kind of want to give you that running tally of what's happening. So at this point in time, given all of those considerations, we're looking at a required out-of-district student tuition account of a budget of $7.1 million. When you take into consideration all of our funding sources that are available, the two district out-of-district tuition accounts and the circuit breaker account, it leaves us with an available balance at this point of just under $250,000, $244,000. So that we do have in the event that other kids go out between now and June. And we did give you the kind of the running list of, we've updated the potentials. So on page 2, you can see that, we had 2 people that were in mediation. One additional child has filed for mediation. And along the right, we basically have just listed in our best estimate if the child ever did prevail and go out of district, what the annualized cost for that tuition would be. Now, obviously, if someone went out now, you wouldn't be paying that full amount between now and June, but just wanted to get you some sense of the cost. And then there are another 5 children that are, we're kind of monitoring and have flagged for potential issues. Again, on a positive note, I attended a Valley Collaborative meeting a few weeks back, and they're actually making a return to the district. They had excess fees at the end of the year that they can't maintain, so they distribute those fees back to all the partner districts, and we're one of them. So we are going to be receiving $57,000 back from Valley. So that will go into our tuition account and basically just to offset tuitions. But that's the update for you as far as kind of where we're standing with tuitions. We'll have an update on this again at the end of the second quarter, at the end of December. I don't think much will change in the next week and a half, and then we'll report back in again in February after we get working on the budget. Did I miss anything?
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. How is it that there's a student who is programmatically managed by another district, yet we're financially responsible? What's that circumstance?
I don't have the notes on that particular case directly in front of me. If a Chelmsford student, who we'd be fiscally responsible for, goes to another district, let's say they school choice to another district. If that district decides that they cannot properly take care of that student, and that district makes a decision to send the student out, then we would be fiscally responsible for that
Even
tuition.
though the other district accepted them through school choice?
It just depends on the circumstances.
So,
Would there be a limit to that exposure? That is, would we only be responsible for the first year and subsequent years would be the accepting district's responsibility, or?
No, usually that district would be responsible for the first year, like for whatever the, let's say this was Lowell.
Yeah.
Then Lowell would pay for the first year that they put them out, but then we would pick up the responsibility the following
Right.
year.
So it's possible that 49,000 would go away next year?
No, I think we're just starting now to
I think
pick it
we're
up.
picking it up
The other
now.
district probably picked it up for the first year, and now we're
Okay.
becoming responsible.
But why aren't we programmatically responsible then, if we've got that student in-house?
He's not in-house, he's in the
So a
the
student
out-of-district place.
from Lowell, school choices to Chelmsford, Chelmsford then decides he needs outplacement, Lowell pays. Get it?
Got it.
No, because
But I
we're
th-
paying.
Yeah, the other tricky thing in this In that particular case, though, and I always get this wrong, there's something with the transportation, where I think we're responsible for the transportation, but the other school district is
Pays for the
responsible
tuition.
for the tuition. I'll actually, on this particular case, give you an email without names.
Yeah,
That
right.
just summarizes what actually happened in this circumstance. The other things that come into play from time to time are custody issues with families and trying to establish residency. But I'll give you the complete workup on this particular case. I'll just email it to you,
Okay.
leaving names out.
Yeah,
just so
of
that you
course.
can get the general gist of what happened. DCF cases are very difficult. It's something that, and this I do know, we have absolutely no control over. When DCF places the student, it automatically reverts back to the student's last known address. So if it was a Chelmsford address, the parents resided in Chelmsford, we're responsible from day one. The other kids that say move into another district that already had the IEP, if the IEP is, say, for a collaborative, that's a public program, then we're immediately responsible. If we're a private school, you wouldn't be. Depending on the date when the student came in, the child would be the responsibility of the other district for the remainder of that year, and we'd pick up the following September. This is something that Carol and her staff kind of monitor on a case-by-case basis. And what's just very difficult, we've had this conversation, is around budgeting for these. Because these aren't even kids that are within our control. The other area that, does hurt us on, is the homeless kids we were talking about a little while ago. We do have, say, a homeless student that, is homeless in our district, but is residing here at this point in time and has gone out, so we're then responsible for the tuition of the homeless student. It's just not cut and dry, but I'll give you the specifics on this case.
The other question is the private school tuition rates. Is that all of the private school tuition rates? Is that just one school with a number of kids?
That was actually 5 private schools, non-collaboratives. The collaboratives were actually, increased rates were included in that first memo back in September. These are 5 private schools with, I believe, about maybe 12 placements in total.
Okay, and why did the rates increase retroactive to July 1st? That's just how it works?
I believe they typically do that every
So
October.
they get to, and there's no control on their rates, right? They get to set their rates however
there's-
they like, and then...
There's a state board, like
Oh, there is.
that OSD, Operational Services
Oh,
Division,
right.
they actually approve the rates. A school at any time can submit for a rate increase, and it goes before the board, there's a hearing, and if they do award the increase, then it is retroactive back to the start of the fiscal year in which it was
Okay.
petitioned. So OSD does set those rates statewide, but it is, except the collaboratives, because we're a member of them, we set our own tuitions.
Is it typical that something changes as late as October?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Okay.
you're gonna see this on an annual basis.
Are we going to see it again this year?
You mean next year?
No, later this year. I
Are
don't
there,
believe so.
do we have a continuing exposure to something like that, or is this pretty much it for the rate
I
increases?
personally don't know of other schools that are up for rate increases at this point.
Okay.
I can add that to the email for you as well.
If it's, you know what, that could be part of the next report, if you identify an exposure. If there's not, then it's
No,
fine.
typically, you do see the rate increases in October of each year.
Okay.
It's
It's in the
uncommon to see
fall.
them other time.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thanks.
So that is your update on out-of-district tuition. The next item on your agenda is the draft fiscal school year 16-17 calendar for your review and consideration. The in adherence to the contract as far as, when you can go back to school on the first day of school or whatnot. This calendar calls for us to go back to school for staff on the Tuesday after Labor Day. That would be our staff orientation day. And then the kids would return on Wednesday, the 7th. And as indicated on the calendar, it talks about all the half-days, professional days, walking you all the way out to June of next year. We're tentatively, the 27th would be the last, the 26th would be the last day for kids, and then the half-day would be on the 27th for staff. All the holidays have been updated to reflect the real holidays, and I'm not sure how the board typically reviews or approves this calendar, but wanted to get it on the agenda before the start of the year, at least for discussion purposes.
Now's an appropriate time. Why aren't we starting September 1st?
If you started September 1st, that would actually be the first day back just for teachers, and then the kids would come on the 2nd. Given that particular, I think it's, for kids to come back before Labor Day for one day, I think it's going to be tough to get a lot of families in. I'm also concerned for the staff if we're only going to get a day in for orientation and a day in for kids, particularly around that long weekend, that attendance just might be not the best you'd want it to be. It would almost make more sense to me to just start with a clean week right after Labor Day.
Well, the other thing would be to get the staff day in before Labor Day and start with the kids on the 6th. Then presumably we would end on June 23rd, which would be a Friday instead of the Monday.
That's only if we get no snow.
I see that, but like that does factor in the 5 snow days. And
Are there 5 or 6?
Actually, 6.
oh, there's 6 snow days.
Yep.
But I mean, we're never going to be able to control for the weather part. I just, I'm actually used to not having a date in the contract that actually indicates when you can go back to work. And the September 1st date kind of throws things off because it moves. My previous district actually just bargained in that we would automatically start the Monday before Labor Day. In any given year, it doesn't specify a date. So all teachers come back the Monday before Labor Day, kids come Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. We do a 4-day long weekend, and then you're into the school year. With this contract, and we're going to be in negotiations, actually specifies you can't come back before September 1st. We're locked into, that Thursday and Friday. And I just don't know, scheduling wise, I know how much effort goes into, orientation day and wanting to get everyone there, and the kids as well, where it's just one day. I don't know, again, I don't have the history on this yet, but what the attendance would be like if the kids only had to come back for one day before a 3-day weekend. So that's what I was hesitant about.
I note that you still name the religious holidays. Would it ever be possible that instead of making those no homework, that we just treat religious holidays as we would a sick day? That we don't, if a student's going to miss because of a religious celebration, bring a note in. And kind of do away with all this denoting the holidays. Just secular holidays. I know, it's
It's a lot longer discussion.
I think we should do a survey on that.
let's do it.
I really do.
Let's do it.
Do it
This
again.
is something that affects the entire school community, staff, students, and parents. Let's do a survey and see what people think about it.
Right, because think of staff members who are celebrating a religious holiday and are using personal days or vacation days.
Yeah, and
Just
while
doesn't seem-
others do not.
Do not have to, because, we recognize that as a holiday.
Right.
I think that's the perfect item for a survey.
Perfect.
We'd be happy to work with you on that.
Excellent.
And we denoted that on the calendar because that's your existing policy.
Exactly.
That talks about that. So we would need to make a policy change if you weren't going to do that. But if you'd like, we could certainly work up a draft survey and bring that back to you to be reviewed before it goes out, because I know it's sensitive. If you approve this survey, then we could implement it and even tie it to be your goal with the survey.
Right.
Is Passover supposed to be on this calendar?
I honestly don't know. We followed what was on the calendar for last year.
Okay.
Again, I think if a student brings in a note,
I think this is a long conversation. I'd like you, Dr. Lang, to put a draft survey together and give us an opportunity to discuss it at a later time.
Okay.
Would that be okay?
Yeah,
I think
no,
doing a
that's
survey
absolutely
is fine.
fine. I don't, as far as like, say, we probably in January should have the discussion just for people vacation scheduling wise to let them know what the first day back to school is going to be. So why don't I, for the next meeting, kind of draft a survey, bring that to you to look at, and then maybe at least at one of those 2 meetings in January, we could approve the beginning of the school year schedule, and then talk about whether we're going to list holidays or not, or how we're going to impact that, because I don't think that comes into play with regard to the first day of school.
No, and I would say even beyond that, if you wanted to take a vote on that tonight, we could do that, and then because
Know
as you
that.
say,
We're not changing it.
it's homework holidays we're talking about changing, and those are
Yeah,
not
I'm okay
official
with that.
holidays.
I'm okay with that if you
So,
want.
So you want to make a motion to start the calendar day, the school year, fresh that Monday after Labor Day, is that?
Well,
Tuesday.
Tuesday was the
Tuesday.
staff day, right? So it's,
You
Well, you can
basically voted to
approve
approve
August
the
and
calendar
September.
as presented and we're just going to take a look at the whole religious holiday
This won't start until Wednesday.
thing.
I make a motion to approve the calendar as it sits today.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, aye? Aye. Any dissent? Hesitation?
I'm just muttering to myself over in the corner.
Okay.
I thought it was going to be simpler than that.
I mean,
Do we get sick days when it comes to that conversation? Can I call it a sick day?
Okay, moving right along. Policies.
oh, God.
Evelyn.
Mr. Battle, would you like to come up and be part of the meeting for a little while?
God.
Isn't this fun?
He certainly earned it.
I noticed you saved all the big stuff for last.
You realize
The most
he-
important,
He
right.
stayed up a half hour beyond his bedtime in order to be here.
You know better. 40 years at the high school, you go to bed at 9 o'clock.
Yes, I
And you
understand.
get up at 5. Yeah, and that is a hard habit to break, yes. So if I nod off, all right,
No.
somebody will push me. How about you? Will you do that? Thank you.
Well, we'll see how fast we can do this.
Mr. Doherty's at home now laughing, by the way.
The policy subcommittee took a look at, we've been looking at 1000s, and there's a whole section on the Performing Arts Center and the auditorium. And so instead of just, if there's any questions from the members of the school committee concerning this, we wanted to make sure that we had Mr. Battle come in and address it, since he is the one that is managing those two facilities. And the recommendations, what you see in red in all of these, he has gone through, he has approved, and, you know, if you have questions, he will have those answers for you. So I guess we're going to start with 1301.03, which is the General Auditorium Performing Arts Center policy. A lot of it is housekeeping. A lot of it is just making it simpler by, instead of having the whole name for the Performing Arts Center, it's going to be called a PAC, P-A-C. And then the auditorium is what is referring to the one that is at McCarthy. When you see "and the secretary" crossed out,
Well, shortly after I became the manager, the secretary took another job. I hope it was not because I took the job. I don't think it was. But, thank you. But what has happened since then is I've just taken over the secretary job. I do all the scheduling, I do all the billing, I do all the estimating, I do all the correspondence about both. And I find it easier to just keep it all in my hands, rather than having to tell a secretary to do it. I could just do it on the computer, and it's all in one hand and moves kind of quickly that way.
so you will see throughout all of those policies that the secretary is crossed out. The title for business manager has changed since we initiated these policies. It has become the director of finance and business. So again, a lot of it is just housekeeping on this. I don't know if anybody has any questions about the content. Okay, I'll move to approve policy 1301.03, General Auditorium / Performing Arts Center policy as amended.
Second? Okay. All in favor, aye? Aye. Anybody else out there?
Aye, aye, aye.
Okay,
Oh, I didn't, okay.
unanimous?
Yes.
I'm just going, they're in here. The next policy is priority / use policy. This is 1301.04. Again, there are recommendations that Mr. Battle has made for us. One of the middle ones, exceptions may be made in individual use with the Chelmsford School Committee approval, provided that the individual meets the leasing criteria. And then we added further down, outside organizations or groups that have had prior use may have priority in booking for the following year, providing that such equivalent dates are available, and have use of facilities form in by July 1st.
That's just a good business practice, I think. Since we've been renting the PAC, there have been some clients who have come back every year. okay? And I tell those clients that they're welcome back the next year. And, you know, the one who's been there the first gets first dibs on the same dates for next year. I think it's only fair, and it keeps them coming back. I've never had anyone who has said, you know, this is unfair. They all know what the system is, and it works for them as it works for us. So nobody goes away angry. And when they decide not to take a date, if a client decides, I don't want to come back next year, then we have someone else that we tell them, this is the date that's open, do you want it? And we do a first refusal after that. So just a good business practice, I think.
Does anybody have any questions?
What's an example of the 7th priority category, individual use with school committee approval?
Yeah,
talking like birthday parties or?
Well, what we're having lately is individuals who want their children to have their dance, an individual dance recital, for example, a cultural dance recital. I've tried to stay away from that only because an individual might not have the facility to provide the $1 million insurance policy. And what I will generally tell the customer at that point in time is, if your daughter or son has been taking dance lessons through this company, let's let the dance company be the person that does the signing of the contract, et cetera. That way they carry an easy rider on their policy. And it's not an infringement upon the individual in terms of a financial burden. And also, it keeps you guys out of it, so to speak. I don't have to come to you and say, I have a client that wants to do this, and explain every time that happens. Okay.
Move to approve policy 1301.04, priority/use policy.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Aye. Thanks again.
The next one is application/scheduling policy for auditorium, and we put in there Performing Arts Center. We changed it, obviously, because we have 2 facilities now. This is policy 1301.05. Again, you can see that there is some housekeeping here where we've crossed out secretary, that the PAC, the, what else do we have? What we was recommended to add is, in the first paragraph, staff may contact the auditorium manager with specific requests in a timely manner without using the use of facilities form.
Right. As a former teacher, all of you realize the amount of paperwork that a teacher does, all right? And I just thought it was redundant to have a teacher fill out a use of facilities form, or an assistant superintendent or a superintendent. It doesn't make sense when they could just give me an email saying, Bernie, do this, and if it's open, I say yes, all right? And then I just say, see Tom if you have any tech problems, and they go see our tech director and go from there. So we don't have to go through a cumbersome process for people within the system.
Are you using School Dude for the
Oh, yeah.
scheduling?
Oh, yeah.
So that's another copy of it anyway,
Exactly,
right?
exactly, yeah.
And you note in the paragraph, it refers back to the prior policy that we approved in terms of the categories, so that in terms of current practice, organizations from categories 1 through 5, and then the reference in the next sentence, category 6 and 7 will be scheduled after July 1st. As you drop down, we added with Corey fingerprinting, because that has become a new policy for us, and there is a reference for that particular policy to bring everything up to date. Any questions? Move to approve policy 1301.05, application/scheduling policy for auditorium/performing arts center.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Next one is 1301.06, finance policy for auditorium performing arts center. It was added in here, the fee structure is subject to change by the Chelmsford School Committee and should be reviewed annually. So if there's going to be any fee changes, you were going to, may make some to us.
Yes, I'm going to be seeing Michelle soon, and we'll look at the fee structure.
Okay. And there also is an auditorium handbook, and any fees or any changes will also be made in that particular handbook. That is reflected in the changes we've made in the policies.
Right.
And pretty much everything else is fairly straightforward. Does anybody have any questions? Move to approve finance policy for auditorium/performing arts center, policy 1301.06.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
The next one is insurance policy. This is just to be reviewed and reaffirmed. I don't know if anybody has any questions on that. This is policy 1301.07. Anybody have any questions?
Do we need to have an insurance policy in our policies? I mean.
Well, this is just reflective of what's in the handbook. We just did this. It keeps everything tight.
Well, I guess that's the bigger question. Should we just refer to the handbook?
We could.
You could, but you're going to have a policy referring to the handbook on insurance, or you're going to consolidate
You
it.
could probably consolidate it into something else. Maybe in the scheduling or the finance policy. If you just added a line that said, users must comply.
The only reason we ever separated it all out is because as people make references when they're going to want to rent our facilities or use them, they're looking for specific things. We didn't want to hide more things in one category. We wanted to have it separated out. That's why there's so many of them.
But, okay.
That's the
It's
only
fine.
reason,
I
Mike.
mean, wouldn't they just look in the handbook, though, most of the time? Instead of our policy
I don't know.
manual?
No, and they have to look at the handbook if they're
Right.
applying, yeah. But I mean, when someone says to me, why do I need an insurance policy? I say because school committee policy
Okay,
requires
all right,
it.
if that's useful.
Makes it
then
easy for me, Mike.
Fine.
Yeah.
Let's keep it then.
Okay, move to approve and reaffirm policy 1301.07 insurance policy.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next policy is 1301.08. Again, there is pretty much, there's not a lot of changes to this particular policy. Under sets and scenery, instead of written approval, it was just approval. Sometimes it's difficult to get written approval. It's easier for Mr. Battle to just say yes or no.
Tom and I will look at the stuff and determine whether it's approvable or not. If not, we have to refer it to the fire department.
And then what will stay in red is under open flame and pyrotechnics.
Right, that's not an addition.
That's not an addition. It's red.
Original.
Did add the illegal drugs and alcoholic beverages, just to make sure that people understand that those things are not to be on the premises. Any questions? Move to approve conditions/restrictions of auditorium/performing arts center policy 1301.08 as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Next one is 1301.09. And again, this is just all housekeeping, putting the appropriate titles with everything. Any questions? Move to,
Well, I'm sorry, the custodians. I guess we have head custodians, right?
We do.
They still have that essential title?
Okay, basically.
All right.
Yeah.
even though they're managed by
Right.
an outside firm, we had some lengthy conversations about that.
Yeah.
You're-
Now when I schedule, I schedule through Sherry Pannerton, all right? And I'll send Sherry every week my needs, okay, by site. And then she will convey that to the appropriate person, whomever that might be at that point in time at that particular school.
Okay, and so the, any coverage is being paid for entirely by whoever is renting the facility?
That is correct. And more.
Okay.
Yeah, right.
Okay, is there anything else on this policy? Okay, move to approve support personnel policy for auditorium/performing arts center, 1301.09 as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Supervision of auditorium/performing arts center, policy 1301.10. Mr. Battle recommended that we remove a whole section because it is not applicable anymore, and that's on ushers.
Yes, we've never had ushers. When we
Pretty good idea, take it out then.
Yeah, when we started, we put a memo on the student body, and nobody was interested in ushering. So-
Maybe if you didn't have to, if they didn't have to wear the little red
We
suit
had,
and the
well,
funny
there was
hat.
somebody that was in charge before Bernie was. And
For a full
they-
6 months,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, and he pretty much put a lot of this stuff in there, and we've removed stuff and added stuff as we're going along.
They didn't have ushers per se, but they had students at the musical telling you where the seats are, which really helps a lot.
Sure it does, yeah.
But this is a little different.
No, I know, I'm just saying, I thought that was really good because it was mobbed.
Well, you know, Al, that's true too, for a lot of people that rent. If they rent and get from us a seating plan, then they oftentimes will put people in the hall to say this is where you sit. But if they do stadium seating, they don't bother with that. You know, it's a first come, first serve at that point in time. But we really don't, we've never had any need for it.
Any other questions?
Did we approve it?
Not yet. Move to approve supervision of auditorium/performing arts center, policy 1301.10.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Refreshment policy 1301.11. Again, this is just some housekeeping in terms of adjusting the terms.
No gum.
Yeah, no gum.
Right.
And sometimes you don't want water either, but
Well, you have no choice on water, okay? Well, actually, you have no choice on a lot of things, because people are gonna sneak things in, we've discovered. Unfortunately, we find the cup of coffee spilled in row L ends up in the front, okay?
yeah, because everything's a slope.
Right down that tier.
People don't understand.
But those people end up having to pay extra to have the place mopped and et cetera, so.
Okay, move to approve refreshment policy for auditorium/performing arts center 1301.11 is amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Cancellation policy. This did change. Mr. Battle has recommended in terms of the percentages due at signing of the contract and what's due at the walkthrough.
Unfortunately, I've had a couple of instances where people have walked on us, all right? I'm in the process right now of trying to collect on a past due from June. And had we increased the percentage of down payment from 25%, which we received, to 40%, we would have covered all of our costs and not experienced a loss. At that point, the loss, I mean, it's a minimal loss, but it's a loss nonetheless. By the way, I just was up at the facility this past week, and I met with, finally, another person up there, and we're in the process of, I hope, closing this, okay, collecting the money. But, I mean, if, you know, at some point in time, people declare bankruptcy or just close, and there's no way you're going to collect that money.
Right.
But it would be nice if we had the 40% up front. That means we've covered all of our costs, plus a small percentage, okay, of profit. And then when we finally send them the bill for the use of facility, that the rest is our profit.
And they can't just dance away.
Pardon me?
And they can't just dance away from there.
Exactly, they can't dance away because, you know, there'll be no dancing until the 40% is paid.
Exactly, exactly.
No dance away, did you really say that?
Also, we added.
Auditorium joke.
Yes. We love our dancing jokes, Mike.
Also, it was recommended to add in there that if they didn't pay in a timely manner, there'd be a late fee, because there is on charge cards, there is on everything else, so standard procedure. Move to approve cancellation policy for auditorium/performing arts center, policy 1301.12.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's all the auditorium policies.
Stay there.
I thought we had 70 to do.
I think we just
Not
accomplished
tonight.
all of them tonight. Check that goal.
Yeah, just a note, just a note, Pat, I did a quick analysis today of how much we've taken in over the years, just for the fun of it, okay? Total amount of money that we've taken in since the Performing Arts Center opened is $283,589, okay? And from that, just sheer profit on rental, and it does not consider any other ancillary rentals like the gymnasium or the cafeterias that go with that, or any money we may realize through such things as custodial fees, okay? Our earnings over that time have been about $116,000. Okay, so we are making money. We're not making as much as we wanted to make. But I happen to note that I noticed the big difference between last year, which was, 2 years ago, which was $57,000, and last year was only $37,000. But then when I looked at it, we lost one major client, because of a shift in a school schedule, which caused us to lose 15,000 there. And also one of our day ladies, Chris Brown Presents, who was the only one that was doing day programs for us. She experienced a big diminution in the number of shows she offered. And so, we lost a lot of income there. On the plus side, we are seeing a banner year right now. People are still calling in to get dates. And the group that we missed 2 years ago because of the shift, because of a reshift now, the musical, particularly going when it did, has freed up time in April, and that is, right now, it's projected $16,000 weekend for this competition. So, yeah, we're on our way to a good year, I think, okay?
Just out of curiosity, Mr. Bell, how much did the pack cost to build?
I have on the foggiest idea. I know that we had a $30 million budget for what was done at McCarthy, at Parker, the whole first floor of the high school, and the PAC. Pat Maloney and his group did an amazing job spending $30 million. I want to say, if I took a guess, it would probably be $2.5 million. That'd be a guess. You guys probably know better than that. Was it 4?
I thought it was like around 4 million.
Remember, it started as a 2,000-seater and was brought back to a 1,000-seater.
Right, and there was
classrooms all around.
Right, and there was all kinds of
Yes, right.
classrooms.
That's why it's hard to remember.
And
'cause
green
we went
rooms
through
and
some-
everything that they cut back
The green
on.
rooms cut back as well, yeah. Which has helped us, because, there are green rooms there, and people take them, but generally, like on these big dance groups, they want the gym, they want the calf, they want every piece they can get, because you've got kids up there dancing, and they just come in all day long dancing at $25 a pop. It's absolutely amazing to watch these organizations, how they operate. But we're making money on it, Sal.
Thank you, Mr. Battle.
You're welcome.
Thank you so
Any other
much.
questions?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much.
And
for
attending all
having me.
those, those meetings.
Always my pleasure. Congratulations, by the way, on being
Citizen
Citizen of the Year.
Citizen of the Year. Yes, that's
Wow.
Didn't
proud
cost
to know
me
you.
much.
Thursday morning, 8:30,
Oh, God.
right here.
What?
The next policy subcommittee.
Yeah, right. 69 left.
We're going to finish or we're going to stop there? Yep.
I don't know, that's at your discretion if you want any further
Let's go.
discussion.
Let's get it done.
All of these?
Let's do it.
There's only, what, 3 or 4 more?
Oh, my gosh.
There's 5.
Okay.
Come on now.
Sal knows.
Gifts, grants, bequests, and donations. This is just housekeeping in terms of just adding Chelmsford and changing titles. Anybody have any questions?
None.
Move to approve gifts, grants, bequests, and donations, policy 1402, as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
1601, school councils. Again, just some housekeeping things, just for people to know. There also is that somewhere along the line, the state legislature, from the time in 1998 to when it was changed in 2005, took the authority from the school committee to actually approve the reports coming in from the schools. We can support them, but we can't vote to approve them.
So we're not taking that out, though?
It's on the bottom. It says school improvement plans currently not approved by school committee vote. It's in there.
Reviewing and approving. We could just take out the and approving
Well, where? Where are you?
on the first page. I know
Well,
you
that's
got-
why
you got the
that's
asterisk,
why I
know.
have the asterisks there, just in case they change, and then we don't have to come back and change the policy. Move,
Let's move right on.
yeah, move to approve,
Nodding.
policy school council 1601 is amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
School parent organizations, minor changes, policy 1602. Any questions? Move to approve school parent organization 1602 as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Policy 1706, advertising on school policy. We're just deleting, and then I will renumber on the bottom in terms of sponsorships or advertisements may be sold on a limited basis, temporary naming of field or the school location may be provided that, and then it lists, and then that will be renumbered. Anybody have any questions? Move to approve advertising on school property as amended, 1706.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Funds from sale of advertising, policy 1707. We added in there the last sentence, Chelmsford School Committee shall receive an annual accounting of the funds received from any advertising on school property or on school website. Any questions? Move to approve funds from sale of advertising, policy 1707 as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Use of students or schools for outside companies, policy 1708. What this does is just outline, gives the parameters if perchance we have movies that, or advertising agencies or any number of things with students come in, we need to have a policy on it. Anybody have any questions?
Have we ever had reason to
You know, you never know when they're going to want to film a
enforce
movie
this
in our
policy?
hallways, right? Emma could be the next Angelina Jolie.
I would love that.
I know you would, and I would.
It might even be piloting a television program. I mean, we have a lot of
Did
things
we?
online already.
Did we do that once?
Did we
Yeah,
do
we
what?
did a movie over at the Emerson Girl out of Middlesex. It was a football movie, so.
They've done
But
some
that wasn't
things.
recent, though.
No, that was
Our own
years ago.
staff does it. They need approval.
That's
But
right.
that's
Oh, I
outside.
forgot about that.
All right, moving right along.
Right, move to approve use of students or schools from outside companies, policy 1708 as amended.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
I can't believe we.
Next item of business is the out-of-state field trip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was one field trip application that came in from the high school, and I mentioned prior to the meeting, I'm still reviewing the language around the insurance for trips and things of that sort. If you don't mind, I'd like to ask that this trip just get moved to the January 5th meeting, and I'll bring back the information on the liability at that point in time. So if you could just delay action on this tonight, move it to January 5th, I'd appreciate it.
Can I ask one other thing in regard to this? Haven't we in the past also received kind of a checklist or a markup or something that shows how foreign trips like this correspond or relate to instructional activities? Am I just imagining that, or have we gotten that for some trips?
Thank God.
Well, some are more specific, in my opinion. Some are more specific to the curriculum.
Right.
This is an arts trip,
It does, makes me sneeze.
so it crosses, it crosses music, art, and architecture, and a bunch of things. And they do draw attention to those things, but it's not as directly tied to curriculum.
May I give one liaison report?
Yes.
I attended the first and hopefully annual Chelmsford High School alumni field hockey game on Saturday night. There were a number of alumni who were winded after 2 minutes. And that's how I received this black eye.
I was looking and going, whoa.
Now I understand.
Yep. My little godson's brother decided to play Pedro Martinez with a field hockey ball. Beamed me.
Jeez.
Yeah. He's only 4, so.
And you're looking forward to this being an annual event?
Annual event, you know it. That was fun. It was a lot of fun, and they played as hard as they could.
Just acknowledge, several of us toured Parker as part of the facilities group the other day and found it very valuable. Just points of information. I've been sort of invited, I guess it sounded like a command performance, to go to see the selectmen on the 11th of January about kindergarten. Also, to general information, I may not make the next meeting, but I may. It depends on travel. Anything else on liaison? All right, so we're going to come back to the goals as they're rewritten at the next meeting. We need to determine where we're going to meet on the community meeting of January 26th. I rushed it last time. We're at the same point this time. Do you want to do an elementary school?
Which one? Who's got a big library area?
South Rose is okay. South Rose is not bad.
Or we could use, we could
Center,
use a
center's
gym or
good.
I would use a gym or a calf. I wouldn't use a library at the elementary level because, unless you think there's not going to be many people.
Right.
They're not that big.
Right.
South Row?
South Row's fine with me.
Okay. So we-
I just-
Go ahead,
if
yeah,
you-
sure.
If you use South Roads, I mean, it's a good venue, but I would recommend using the CAF and not the library.
Yeah.
Just because the library's all the way in the back of the
Yeah.
the building.
Right.
But the CAF's right there, we could open up the door right off the parking lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, that works.
Another piece of, we have a tri-board meeting on the 20th, I believe. And so you can put that on your calendar. We're also going, for the future, with the survey on the holidays. And you had mentioned before, checking for language, insurance, whatever, with regard to trips.
Yep, and I'll bring that as a
Roads.
next meeting.
Did anyone remember anything else, Al?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to commend the board and our superintendent one more time. I received a number of phone calls from parents, a couple of emails also I'd be happy to share with the board, of congratulating the school board and the superintendent and the chief of police, the police department, for the walkthrough with the canines. Once again, our parents just conveyed to me, and all I can say is it's one step closer to making them feel a little bit more comfortable, and safety being first for our kids. I think that's been the first one we've done in quite a long time. As a matter of fact, I couldn't find anybody to give me an exact date of the last one that was done. So I really appreciate it. I think it's a step in the right direction, and we certainly got a lot of feedback in a positive way for it. So that's
The last one that was done was limited to parking lots.
Yeah,
And
inside the
we found the
schools.
same amount of marijuana, well, this much in a
Parking lot.
Yeah.
ashtray in a car.
When was the last time it was in the school, sir?
While ago.
That's right. You're right. You're right, Ms. Thomas.
5 years ago?
Even longer. Even longer.
6?
And also, by the way, there wasn't just a Chelmsford Police Department. We also want to congratulate the other local towns that also cooperated
15
with that.
dogs.
That was unbelievable. How many towns, sir?
I'm not sure of that, but I'd like just a quick comment on the dogs. That's not enough for that size school to be, it's hard for you to understand, but we had a circumstance where we had to do a search in a hurry because of a possible bomb issue, and we had 2 dogs. The dogs can only work a short period of time, like 3 to 5 minutes, I think. Then they because they lose focus. And so in order to do, that 15 sounds like a lot. It's not.
Wow.
And the other thing related to that, when we had that issue, we had the, what's the name of the regional team?
The
Star?
Nemlec? Oh, the Star.
Star
team.
team. We had the Star team come in to search kids coming in on the following Monday as precaution, and I was concerned about that. They're fantastic, and we have several people from our district that participate. So if you ever hear reference to the Star team, you might be concerned that, they're outside police and they're going to be, they were fantastic.
Well, the chief of police and this board said that they were going to make children's safety a priority, and I think this is the right step in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, no, just not to belabor it for 2 seconds, the cooperation with the police department's been excellent, really since I've been here. On that particular instance, I think it was actually 12 communities that, in the state police that had dogs involved. It's something I think we just all need to be accustomed to these days, and it's just one more measure you take to make sure that your school is safe. But the kids and staff were excellent during the drill. It's certainly I know that there were some comments that had gone online after the event, but it is a planned event as far as this immediate staff knowing what's happening, but it's not a planned event that you ever really invite the public into.
That's right. It defeats the purpose.
It defeats the purpose of it being that kind of an event. But a considerable amount of time and coordination went in with the Principal Murray at the high school and his staff. Chief Spinney and his staff at the police department did an outstanding job, and really the level of cooperation has been excellent. As Al mentioned, the STARS team, we have a few members of the staff that are part of that, and just regionally, it's great to know if you ever did have an issue, you needed some help, there's people in district and just locally that can reach out on all different levels. It's law enforcement, it's social services, it's school administrators that make up those STAR teams. So you get a good perspective on different groups that can come to help when you actually do have a crisis, or even you're just planning for a crisis. So very, very happy with the outcome, very happy with the cooperation, and it's things that we'll continue doing going forward.
I agree with you, and I do also just want to shout out to Principal Murray, who did an unbelievable job. He was one of the people that was for this, and we really appreciate what he did. We got a lot of positive feedback about Principal Murray. Thank you, sir.
When further planning's done, don't remember where this conversation took place, but Walter, the position that Walter Hadlin held, never was involved. He was involved with safety, communication kind of thing in the community. Never participated in any planning that we did. I don't know who the next person is, but they should be included. It just makes sense.
Yeah.
Just something to, so if you run into that situation.
Sure.
It makes sense.
One other thing that we haven't addressed, we were going to have Dorothy Presser or another member of MASC come back as a follow-up. We also have discussed about having one of them come back to talk about the financial aspect of things, and there's an awful lot of questions that are still out in the community hanging, knowing what our responsibilities and roles and things are. So that's something that we need to put on the calendar at some point, to have them come back to do that. And she was also going to talk about goal setting. I don't know if we want to change that in any capacity, if we're doing our own thing.
She did actually follow up with an email. I'll forward it out to the committee tomorrow. She proposed some dates. I'll get some new dates for after the holidays, for as we get into early January. But she was ready to come back for part 2 of that meeting, and I know she was looking for us to give her some input on different directions. We can have her maybe take a look at what we're doing with goals for the year and just adapt something to that training, and then talk about just general policies or other kind of coordinated work that we'll be doing together going forward. So I'll email that out to you tomorrow.
I know that each one of those individuals have a different focus. So I don't know that Dorothy would do the thing on the finances that we would be asking, or it would be under somebody else, so we just need to find that out.
But yeah, I think she'll help coordinate, though, whoever needs to come up.
Yes, because she's in this area.
She'll do that for us.
Oh, yeah. Any press questions?
Sorry, you can't leave yet.
That's okay. That's okay.
It's okay, the cameras turn off at 10 o'clock.
Alana Melanson, Lowell's son. So I understand that you held an executive session earlier this evening to discuss the arbitrator's decision on the grievance that was filed by the administrators who were laid off last year. Does the committee accept that decision, or is there a plan to appeal?
We're going to give it stuff.
The decision's public at this point, so if you want, we can turn that over tomorrow.
Okay. We accept the decision, and the financial information's been worked out and can be available to you tomorrow.
Oh, so you don't have the numbers available tonight?
Can I just clarify one quick thing? The decision of the arbitrator is public at this point, so we can give you a copy of the decision.
Okay.
The calculation, I have a draft calculation that I need to share with our council, who will then share it with their council to see if there's an agreement. That I can't share at this point in time. You can get a copy of the decision, we'll give that to you.
Okay.
But the actual calculation just needs to go between the two attorneys to make sure there's agreement before that becomes public. As soon as it's public and the two attorneys agree, I'm happy to turn the calculation over to you.
Great. Roughly when do you expect that might be?
I would hope within the week.
Within the week, okay.
Oh, well, actually, today's Wednesday, within a week or so. Hopefully
Okay.
before the holidays.
And what is the expectation as to when those amounts will be paid to the two administrators, former administrators?
When there's agreement to the number.
Okay. One last thing. The source of the funding, has that been identified yet?
I'll bring a recommendation to the committee once the dollar amount's actually been approved, with a recommendation for a transfer to make that payment.
Okay. That was all. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Move to
Make
adjourn.
motion.
Made and seconded, all in favor, aye. We're done.